Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Neha Verma. Megha Deshpande lived with her 21-years-old daughter, Ashlesha, and her 70-years-old mother, Rohini, in a luxurious neighborhood called Srinagar in Indore. This city known for consistently ranking as one of the cleanest in India. The fact that they resided in Srinagar, an area predominantly inhabited by the wealthy, suggested that the Deshpande family was financially well off. Megha worked for a multi-level marketing (MLM) company for a considerable time. MLM is also referred to as network marketing, direct selling, and pyramid selling. To understand how an MLM business works, imagine a pyramid structure. At the top is the company owner. When the owner recruits two individuals, and they join the company, it creates a network. These two individuals then recruit more people to join the company, and the process continues. The company generates profit from each new member or associate that joins, allowing the business owner to constantly earn income through the growth of their network. Before moving to Indore, Megha lived in Yuan, a city approximately 35 miles away, with her husband, Manoj Deshpande. However, due to his job as a bank manager, Manoj remained in Yuan, while Megha relocated to Indore with her daughter and mother a few months ago. Thanks to Manoj's stable job and Megha's successful career in the MLM company, the Megha's family has a stable financial situation and does not have to worry about money. In the neighborhood where Megha lives, people are very united and it is also very safe with very little crime. Residents have always felt safe, and nothing unusual has ever happened there until June 13, 2011, when that all changed. On that day, no one in Megha's family left the house until noon, and no one heard their voices. A neighbor walked by Megha's house and then she noticed a very strange thing. Footprints made of bloody stains led around the house, alarming her. She quickly notified the landlord. And the landlord then knocked on the door several times, but received no answer. Next, the landlord attempted to look inside through a window and was met with a very scary sight. 3 women were lying on the floor, their bodies covered in blood. Overcome with fear, he quickly alerted the police. The brutal murder of the Megha family members sent shockwaves through the community. By the time the police arrived at the crime scene, a large crowd had gathered outside their house. Upon entering the house, the police officers were met with a gruesome scene, the bodies of 3 women who had been brutally murdered. The police secured the crime scene and began their investigation. During this process, they found 2 bullet shells inside the house. One of the shells was linked to the gunshot wound that killed Megha, who had been shot in the head. However, despite a thorough search of the house lobby, the police were unable to locate the second bullet. A forensic team was called in to collect evidence from the crime scene. The bodies of the 3 women were then sent for post-mortem examination. As news of the murder spread, the entire city of Indore was left reeling in shock. The post-mortem report later revealed that 21-years-old Ashlesha and her 70-years-old grandmother, Rohini, had died from excessive bleeding caused by multiple stab wounds inflicted on their bodies. This report confirms that Megha was the only one shot to death. However, it raises a crucial question for the police. If 2 bullet shells were found, who was the second shot intended for? Megha's husband, along with the public, also started pressuring the police, demanding that they solve the case quickly so that the criminals are held accountable to the fullest extent of Indian law. This makes it even more urgent for the police to solve this case quickly. To do this, several teams were deployed to investigate. One team analyzed the call detail records of the 3 victims, Megha, Ashlesha, Rohini. Another team re-examined the forensic evidence. Initially, the police have collected a blood sample from the crime scene that didn't belong to Megha, Ashlesha, or Rohini. The police then detained and questioned various suspects from the surrounding area. Based on the evidence collected, the police have recorded this as a robbery and murder case. Further investigation of the phone records revealed that there was a phone number that had called Megha multiple times and she had long conversations with this number. After obtaining detailed information about the number, the police found it was registered to a girl named Neha. They then began tracking her location to gather potential leads in the case. One day, the police located Neha near an ATM in the area. They promptly sent a team to bring her to the police station for questioning. After being informed of the situation of the case, Neha was left astounded. She explained that she initially met Megha at a shopping mall. Then, Neha had bumped into Megha while rushing, causing Megha to drop some items. As Neha apologized and helped Megha gather her belongings, they engaged in conversation and developed a rapport. And Neha even driving Megha to her car, marking the start of their friendship. Neha also discovered that Megha worked for a multi-level marketing (MLM) company. After exchanging phone numbers, they occasionally spoke over the phone. Neha's interest in the MLM business model led her to discuss it with Megha. However, the police found Neha's story suspicious, as her words didn't match her body language. As a result, the police questioned her forcefully and in a confrontational manner. Neha initially tries to hide her dishonesty, but under intense police questioning, she confesses. She then told the police a story that even surprised them. Neha Verma was a 23-year-old beautician who was known for her beauty and cheerful personality. Her father, a van driver, had limited financial resources, making it challenging for Neha to pursue her dreams. During this time, Neha met Rahul, and they developed a close friendship that blossomed into romance. At 24, Rahul was handsome but also struggled financially. Despite their similar financial situations, they deeply loved each other and wanted to get married. They sought opportunities to rapidly build wealth and achieve a comfortable lifestyle, securing their financial future. Neha and Megha met for the first time. Megha, who had a taste for expensive jewelry, was wearing gold ornaments that day. Neha perceived Megha as wealthy due to her jewelry and decided to approach her. Neha started approaching Megha by deliberately bumping into her, start chatting and befriending her. Neha started thinking about robbing Megha after getting to call her through phone calls. Neha then shared her plan with her boyfriend Rahul, telling him that Megha was extremely wealthy, making her an easy target. Rahul liked the idea, as it would solve their financial problems and allow them to live comfortably once they were married. Following this, Rahul started making plans to kill Megha and the two other women in her house. He thought that if he could get away with the crime without anyone finding out, no one would be able to file a complaint against them. Rahul finalized his plan but needed a gun to carry it out. Luckily for him, his friend Manoj, who was close to both Rahul and Neha, had a gun. Rahul had been planning to kill Megha and her family, and he was waiting for the perfect moment to execute his plan. That moment arrived on June 13, 2011. On that day, Neha called Megha and expressed interest in joining her multi-level marketing scheme, MLM. Unbeknownst to Megha, this was a ruse orchestrated by Rahul. Neha arrived at Megha's house early in the morning, and Megha asked her to fill out a membership form. However, Neha didn't know what information to fill in the form, so she asked Megha if she could get a friend arrive to help her. Megha agreed, and Neha then called Rahul, as planned. Rahul and his accomplice, Manoj, were waiting for Neha's call, and they immediately went to Megha's house. Once Rahul entered the house, he pulled out a gun and shot Megha at point-blank range, killing her instantly. The sound of this gunshot reached Ashlesha and Rohini, causing both of them to run into the lobby. Rahul and Manoj initially intimidated Ashlesha and her grandmother Rohini, demanding Ashlesha's ATM card and PIN in exchange for their lives. Ashlesha, hoping to be spared, quickly handed over the card. However, Rahul and Manoj were aware that they had been seen, and this posed a risk to their. To eliminate witnesses, Rahul attempted to shoot Ashlesha but accidentally shot himself in the foot instead. Manoj then took a knife and brutally murdered both Ashlesha and Rohini. After the killings, the three thieves, including Neha, Rahul, Manoj, stole approximately 1 million Indian rupees and valuable jewelry worth up to $500,000 rupees and Ashlesha's ATM card. Rahul, along with Neha and Manoj, had planned to use the ATM card to withdraw cash. However, their plan failed when Neha was arrested by the police. Rahul to file an untrue report at the police station and was arrested, but was later hospitalized due to gunshot wounds. The police matched Rahul's blood sample from the crime scene to one taken from him. It was a match. The police quickly solved the case and arrested the suspects. Following a prolonged and contentious court case, the three defendants, Neha, Rahul, Manoj, were sentenced to death by hanging in December 2013. The district court handed down this severe punishment due to the heinous nature of the crime, in which the defendants killed women from 3 generations of the Megha family. Physical evidence, including blood-stained clothing, knives, and jewelry, was recovered from the defendants by the police. One of the defendants, Neha, is currently serving her sentence in the central jail. Notably, she has been teaching a beauty parlor course to fellow female inmates while incarcerated. This case was notable for being the first time the district court had imposed a death sentence on a woman. Neha and Rahul's desire for quick wealth led them to get involved in a life of crime. It is fortunate that the perpetrators were caught. If Megha had not worn her valuable jewelry to the mall and had not trusted a stranger she met there, the outcome may have been different. Megha's husband, Megha Deshpande, was pleased with the court's decision and praised the judiciary and the police for their efforts. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brianna Marie Schneller. Brianna was a vibrant and diligent young woman who excelled academically as the top student at Everest High School in Washington. She had a passion for Mexican cuisine, music, and dancing, and enjoyed thrilling activities like roller coasters. Her parents, Craig and Lori Schneller, described her as an outstanding individual. Brianna had achieved a remarkable feat by being the only student from Wisconsin to qualify for a prestigious national competition in professional and technical fields. She was set to present her project in Tennessee that summer. Her long-term goal was to pursue higher education in restaurant management and eventually start her own business in the food industry. To gain experience and skills, she worked part-time at the El Michal restaurant in Rib Mountain. Colleagues, friends, and customers alike appreciated Brianna's kind and responsive nature. With her graduation and upcoming wedding to her fiancé, 22-year-old Sebastian Ramirez, just around the corner, the future looked bright for this ambitious and talented Brianna. At first, Brianna's parents disapproved of her relationship with Sebastian due to their age difference and their belief that she was growing up too fast. However, after getting to know Sebastian better, they came to trust him and saw that he genuinely loved Brianna and was committed to their future together. The couple eventually moved in together, renting an apartment on 12th Avenue in Wa, along with Sebastian's 19-year-old brother, Hugo. From the outside, it seemed like the three of them got along well and lived harmoniously, with many people envying their friendship. Sebastian and his brother also supported Brianna's interests and worked with her at a local restaurant called El Tequila Salsa. One ordinary workday changed everything for Sebastian and Brianna. No one anticipated the horrific tragedy that would soon unfold, shattering their plans and dreams. On the morning of May 2, 2009, Sebastian was the first to wake up, choosing not to disturb Brianna, who was sleeping peacefully beside him. Since it was her day off from school, she didn't need to rush. While Sebastian was in the shower, Brianna woke up and they exchanged sweet greetings, discussing their plans for the day. Meanwhile, Sebastian tried to rouse his younger brother, Hugo, who had stumbled in late the night before after overindulging at a party. After getting ready, Sebastian headed to work, just a 5 to 10 minute walk away. Hugo followed soon after, leaving Brianna alone at home, where she chatted with her mother and attended to her tasks. Hugo felt restless and had a headache, probably from drinking too much the night before. He was struggling to focus and regretted overindulging. To get some rest, he decided to swap lunch breaks with a colleague and headed home at 1:20 p.m. When he entered the apartment, everything seemed normal at first. However, as he walked further, he noticed that his brother's and girlfriend's room was in disarray. What caught his attention was Brianna lying on the floor. Hugo rushed to her and asked what had happened, but she didn't respond. At first, he didn't notice the blood. When he moved the towel that had been covering her face, he let out a scream. Brianna was unrecognizably disfigured. Hugo grabbed the phone to call the emergency services, but his hands were shaking and his mind was foggy. Despite his distress, he knew he had to act. He ran to his neighbor's apartment, a floor below, through tears. Young Ramirez tried to explain what had happened and asked her to call for help. On a Saturday afternoon, emergency services received a call despite it being a day of rest. A woman called on behalf of her neighbor, requesting medical help for Brianna, who lay severely injured on the floor with cuts and a disfigured face, showing no signs of life. Police and paramedics were immediately dispatched. When they arrived at the apartment building, the parking lot was crowded, but one individual, Hugo Ramirez, stood out and approached them. He led the officers to the apartment, where he, barely able to speak, pointed out the shocking scene before them. At the center of it all lay Brianna, her body bearing deep stab wounds on her chest, neck, and wrist. The officers asked him to leave the room while forensic specialists began their examination of the crime scene. The crime scene suggested the victim had been lying there for a while, with dried blood scattered everywhere. Defensive cuts on her arms showed she tried to fight back, but was overpowered. The forensic team found key evidence: a bloody, broken iron on the floor, 2 knives in the sink, one with a missing tip, blood on the soap, and a telling shoe print on the carpet. These details hinted at the brutal attack. No signs of forced entry suggested Brianna knew her attacker or they had a way in without breaking in. Scattered bills, accumulated from work, totaled a substantial sum, but nothing seemed missing. The broken knife tip in her body indicated a violent attack, not robbery. The amount of force needed to break the knife hinted at a strong attacker. Police needed to speak with Brianna's relatives and friends to gather information and convey the devastating news. Craig and Laura Schneller waited anxiously at the police station, unable to reach their daughter after hearing of a tragedy at her home. Their worry turned to dread as officers delivered devastating news, their worst fears confirmed. The loss shattered their lives, dividing their world into before and after. Authorities showed them identification photos, but only those revealing part of her face due to extensive injuries. The confirmation was almost too much to bear. After consulting with the psychologist, Craig and Lori, Brianna's parents, were willing to cooperate with the investigation to help catch the person responsible. They provided as much information as possible about their daughter's life, emphasizing that she had no known enemies or anyone who might hold a grudge against her. Lori was the last person Brianna had communicated with that morning, having messaged her around 10 a.m. to let her know she had taken Brianna's car to the auto repair shop. Brianna responded to the message, which meant the incident occurred after she spoke with her mother and before Hugo arrived, establishing a timeline for the events. The police launched a thorough investigation, starting by interviewing the Rodriguez brothers, Sebastian and Hugo, separately. Sebastian, Brianna's fiancé, reported that he woke up at 9:15 a.m., had a brief conversation with Brianna while getting ready for work, and then woke his brother up. By 10:15 a.m., he was already at the restaurant. He learned about Brianna's death after receiving a phone call. Hugo's account matched his brother's, stating he left the house about 10 to 15 minutes after Sebastian and returned home at 1:20 p.m. because he was feeling unwell and wanted to rest. However, his illness and fatigue disappeared when he discovered Brianna's body. After that, he was in shock, unable to think clearly or react properly, so he ran to a neighbor for help. The Ramirez brothers' statements seemed believable, and their distress appeared genuine. However, the police knew that convincing performances were not enough. They needed concrete evidence to prove their innocence. It was possible that one brother was the killer, and the other was covering for him. To explore this possibility, detectives asked the brothers about their relationships with each other. Sebastian expressed his love for Brianna and his excitement about their upcoming wedding. Hugo was questioned about any potential grudges against his brother's girlfriend, or if they had argued, but he denied any issues. He also clarified that, despite finding Brianna attractive, he had no romantic intentions towards her because he valued his good relationship with his brother and would never interfere with Sebastian's happiness. Hugo considered Brianna like a sister. The police interrogated the brothers for hours, but neither aroused any suspicion. After taking DNA samples, they were allowed to return home. Detectives verified the brothers' alibis by interviewing El Tequila Salsa restaurant employees and reviewing surveillance footage. The evidence confirmed their accounts, ruling out a domestic crime. The new focus became identifying Brianna's killer. Was a predator watching her, striking when she was alone? The investigation continued. The autopsy results confirmed the police's initial suspicions. Brianna was hit on the head with a blunt object, then her throat was slit and she suffered multiple stab wounds. The intense attack left numerous, potentially fatal wounds. Despite the brutality, Brianna fought back fiercely, as evidenced by foreign DNA under her fingernails. Initial claims that nothing was missing proved false. Brianna's phone was gone, and Sebastian reported it to detectives. The phone's active signal led police to a nearby restaurant where Sebastian and Hugo worked. The investigation became even more complicated when the brothers provided a solid alibi and one of them reported the missing phone, which seemed suspicious given the coincidences. Detectives rushed to the location indicated, but instead of a crime scene, they found themselves in the parking lot of a shopping center with a restaurant. After a brief search, they found a plastic takeout bag in a trash bin with the logo of El Tequila Salsa. Inside the bag, they discovered the girl's phone, 2 mismatched gloves, and a pair of women's underwear. One of the gloves was stained with blood. This unexpected discovery changed the direction of the investigation, suggesting that the crime might have been motivated by intimate reasons and involved a predator. The bag and its contents were sent to the laboratory to be analyzed for potential fingerprints or DNA evidence from the perpetrator. When shown a photo of the items, Sebastian identified the underwear as belonging to his girlfriend. The investigation continued, with multiple interrogations of the restaurant staff, and on May 5th, everyone was asked to provide DNA samples and undergo medical examinations to check for scratches or injuries. The police also thoroughly reviewed both internal and external surveillance footage from the restaurant and neighboring establishments. The police faced a significant challenge in identifying who had discarded the bag. Their initial attention focused on a kitchen worker who arrived late to work around the time Brianna's lifeless body was discovered. However, he had a solid alibi, as a traffic stop for speeding en route to the restaurant supported his claim. Fortunately, reviewing surveillance footage greatly aided the investigation. Rahul Ponsaroa, a 24-year-old kitchen manager, became a person of interest. He left the building at 10:18 a.m. wearing a brown hoodie, but returned without it at 10:53 a.m. Rahul claimed he went to pick up friend Luciano, a dishwasher who lived in the same building as the victims. Upon further inquiry, Rahul claimed the errand took about 20 minutes, but a discrepancy remained. What happened during the remaining 15 minutes? Rahul refused to provide an explanation, while Luciano corroborated Rahul's story, stating they didn't stop anywhere on their way to work. Nevertheless, the 15-minute gap continued to trouble detectives, and Rahul's behavior raised suspicions, particularly given the unexplained cuts on his hands, which he attributed to working with knives. Rahul seemed suspicious, but there wasn't enough evidence to hold him. However, by May 9th, investigators had established a crucial timeline. On May 2nd at 1:16 p.m., a single employee left the back door of El Tequila Salsa, and at the same time, only one person approached the trash bins. It didn't take long to identify the suspect, and surprisingly, it wasn't Sebastian or Hugo Ramirez, as initially suspected, but Raul Ponceroa, the manager. Authorities searched Raul's home, finding intriguing personal items: women's underwear, adult videos, a brown hoodie, and a glove like one found in a trash bin. They sent his DNA for comparison with the plastic bag samples and analyzed a female hair strand on his clothing. With evidence pointing to Brianna, they awaited test results. Once confirmed, Raul was arrested for suspected first-degree murder. Sebastian was stunned, wondering what drove Raul to hurt Brianna, someone they barely knew. Raul had always seemed kind and cheerful, the last person Sebastian suspected of harming anyone. The trial of Raul Ponrocha took place in 2011, following a lengthy investigation. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Raul denied any involvement in the crime and refused to admit guilt. However, the prosecution presented compelling proof, including the presence of Raul's DNA on all key pieces of evidence, such as the iron, knives, plastic bag, and its contents, as well as under Brianna's fingernails. Furthermore, a shoe print found at the crime scene matched the size and pattern of Raul's shoes. Raul arrived at work at 9 a.m. on May 2, 2009, and on his way to the restaurant, he passed the victim's house, which had long fascinated him. Seeing no car, he assumed she was out and took the opportunity to enter her apartment. Raul had a peculiar habit of collecting women's underwear, which was later found under his mattress. After the Rodriguez brothers arrived, Raul left the restaurant, claiming to pick up lunch. Instead, he entered the victim's apartment, easily unlocking the door. He rummaged through her belongings in her room, and when she caught him off guard, he struck her with an iron and slashed her throat with a knife, inflicting multiple injuries. The investigation found that the killer, Raul, took pleasure in the murder, inflicting multiple wounds with different knives. He then tried to cover his tracks, washing his hands and removing his jacket before resuming work as usual. During a lunch break, he disposed of the evidence in a trash bin, unaware he was caught on the kitchen's video recordings. Raul claimed to have met Brianna but didn't kill her, instead implicating a former restaurant employee, Sergio, who he saw at her house on the day of her death. However, Sergio had an alibi, having left the country weeks prior to care for his ill father in Mexico. He testified at the trial, refuting Raul's accusation and disproving any involvement in the crime. Raul's attempt to shift blame failed. The defendant showed no remorse for falsely accusing an innocent person of a heinous crime during the trial. Brianna's relatives, including Sebastian and Hugo, were present and struggled to contain their emotions. Raul Ponrocha was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. He is currently serving his sentence in Wisconsin. Brianna's father stated that her case became personal for many involved, cherishing memories of her. He confessed that her death broke his heart and he lost faith. It is hoped that Sebastian has closed this tragic chapter and moved forward. His brother Hugo later appeared on a TV show discussing their ordeal. Raul's actions were fatal for Brianna, devastating her family's hearts. If he hadn't tried to cover up his tracks, he might have gotten away with clumsy apologies, possibly leading to a confrontation with the Rodriguez brothers. It's unlikely Brianna would have reported him to the police, and even then, the incident could have been resolved with minimal harm. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. Catherine Wells-Burr was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Wells-Burr. She had an older sister named Lynn. During her 2010 university break, Catherine met Rafal Novak, a 31-year-old employee, on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Rafal, a tall, handsome blonde from Poland, caught her attention. He had moved to England about 4 years earlier, leaving behind a former wife and son. Catherine and Rafal started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site's cafe. However, their lunches soon turned into romantic dinners. Rafal wooed Catherine with thoughtful gestures, such as giving her beautiful bouquets, taking her to movies, and going on walks together. As they grew closer, Rafal opened up to Catherine about his past life and his reasons for moving to the UK. Catherine's trusting nature led her to open up completely to the blonde man, Rafal Novak. Their relationship accelerated rapidly, and within a few months, she introduced him to her parents, who warmly welcomed him into the family and hoped for their future happiness together. As their relationship blossomed, the couple began planning their wedding, which was set to take place in 2011. After graduating with honors from Bath Spa University, Catherine secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. She quickly excelled in her career, generating job opportunities for her parents and sister. Catherine's exceptional qualities, including her intelligence, education, and people skills, made her a remarkable leader. She was empathetic towards her colleagues, always willing to lend a helping hand, and her kind gaze and radiant smile earned her the respect and admiration of those around her. As Catherine's career soared, her substantial earnings, combined with Rafal's, enabled them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace on Willow Way. Catherine and Raphael, a young couple with successful careers, bought a house with a mortgage and secured insurance coverage through their agreement with the bank. They seemed to have everything they needed for happiness. However, their lives took a dramatic turn on September 12, 2012, a day that would be a turning point in their lives. As the investigation into their lives progressed, new and surprising facts came to light. These revelations slowly exposed the deception that had been present in their relationship from the beginning. It turned out that Raphael, 29, had fled Poland to escape significant debts, leaving behind a wife and child. He moved to the UK, where he began a relationship with Anna Lovage in 2008. Later, he met Catherine Wells-Burr, and for a time, he saw both women. Ultimately, he chose Catherine, seeing her as a more suitable partner for building a family and achieving financial stability. Catherine had genuine dreams of a happy marriage with the man she loved and starting a family. However, Novak, her partner, was secretly planning to murder her. He intended to use the life insurance payout and inherit their large house, which Catherine had partially paid for. On the day Catherine disappeared, Novak waited a few hours before approaching her boss, pretending to be worried and distraught. He acted convincingly, deceiving her colleagues and relatives. When Catherine could not be found at her parents' home or her own, and her car was missing, Novak fabricated a story about her receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. Her family then contacted the police. The family gathered in the young couple's living room, waiting for Catherine's return, when they received devastating news. A burning car with a body inside had been found. Raphael described the evening before her disappearance as uneventful, saying they went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, and watched TV together before bedtime. Catherine seemed normal and not frightened or distressed. However, further investigation revealed that Catherine's death occurred earlier than initially thought. She was strangled around 2 a.m. while sleeping in her own bed. Her body was then placed in the car, driven a short distance from the house, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Despite this, Raphael had a solid alibi, claiming he was at work from 5:30 a.m. and Catherine was still in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m., but a crucial detail emerged. Raphael was still at home at 1:30 a.m., significantly changing the direction of the case. As a result, Raphael Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Wellsbur's murder. Evidence mounted against him, and he was detained for further investigation. Raphael claimed Catherine was being stalked by someone who had sent her threatening letters and driven her to hysteria. During the investigation, proof of Catherine's secret online life was uncovered, revealing accounts on adult websites and intimate exchanges with men that her loved ones knew nothing about. A letter from a secret admirer was also found, but despite attempts to hide the truth, the evidence ultimately came to light. Raphael tried to mislead the investigation, but he made a critical mistake by not destroying key evidence that linked him directly to Catherine's death. This oversight gave the prosecution a motive to pursue. Examination of Novak's phone revealed that he had ongoing communication and meetings with Anna Lovich over the past few months. Further investigation revealed that Raphael also had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000, with each other as the sole beneficiaries. The significant life insurance payout emerged as the primary motive behind Catherine's murder and the arson of her car, which was intended to throw off the investigation. On the day Catherine disappeared, police found a message on Anna Lovich's phone from Catherine. They also discovered that Anna and her uncle had filled a gas canister at a gas station a few days before the crime. This led them to suspect Anna and her uncle, Todd Dmitry Shin, of being involved in Catherine's disappearance and trying to cover their tracks with arson. The investigation revealed that Anna, her uncle, and a third person had planned the crime meticulously over several months. They created fake accounts on pornographic websites, uploaded doctored photos of Catherine, and fabricated conversations with men to mislead the investigation. However, when confronted with the evidence, Anna and her uncle eventually cracked and started pointing fingers at each other. Anna accused Novak of killing someone for insurance money, while Novak claimed Anna did it out of jealousy towards a rival. The true culprits crafted a deceitful narrative around an innocent young woman, Catherine. They created fake online profiles for her, suggesting she was looking for casual sexual encounters. To cover their tracks, the conspirators went to great lengths to mislead investigators. They set Catherine's body on fire and fabricated a fake history for her, portraying her as a secretive and promiscuous person with many desires. They even created the illusion of a mysterious lover who might have killed her. One of them sent a text from Catherine's phone at 5:17 a.m. on the day she died, implying she was on her way to meet this fictional person. When forensic experts investigated the car fire, they found that Catherine was wearing her favorite nightgown, not the outfit she would have worn to meet a man, as she had claimed. This discovery led them to suspect that she was attacked in her own home rather than in the car. The police also found that a pillow was missing from her bed, and the remaining pillowcase had been recently washed and hung to dry. Further investigation revealed a SIM card in Anna Lovich's trash bin that was linked to the phone number Catherine had supposedly used to send texts that morning. Additionally, detectives discovered notes written by Lovich, indicating that she was trying to come up with ideas for messages to make it seem like Catherine was communicating with a mysterious person. As the evidence against them mounted, Novak and Linovich changed their story, claiming that Catherine's death was actually the work of a hired hitman. However, just before the trial began, Lovich attempted to create a distraction by having a fellow inmate pass on a fake confession from a supposed hitman who claimed to have been paid £20,000 by Novak to kill Catherine. Raphael Novak's girlfriend Catherine was murdered, and a fictional story written by Vinovich sheds light on the gruesome details. The story claims that Catherine's body was found in the trunk of her car, and the killer, supposedly a hitman, helped Novak stage her death to look like a murder-suicide. According to the story, Novak placed Catherine's body in the driver's seat, removed the tape from her mouth, put on her shoes, buckled her seatbelt, and kissed her goodbye before setting the car on fire. In reality, Novak played the role of a grieving boyfriend to perfection, even convincing Catherine's mother, Jane, of his innocence. He told her that Catherine was receiving threatening messages from an ex-boyfriend and that she had spoken of taking her own life. Novak's act was so convincing that Catherine's parents comforted him, unaware that he was responsible for their daughter's death. In fact, Catherine's mother even hugged Novak after her death and allowed him to call her mom. She said that after the police told her in the early days of the investigation that he was seen more as a witness than a suspect, she decided to offer him all the support possible. "I thought if Catherine loved him that much and he was part of our family, then he deserved to come back." The lengthy trial commenced under the chairmanship of Justice Sharp. The three defendants stood to gain a significant sum of money and property from Catherine Wellsbur's death. They had planned to receive a £123,000 life insurance payout and take ownership of her two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that Rahul Novak showed no emotional response when the police found Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12th. Meanwhile, Anna Lagvinovich frequently shook her head and laughed during the proceedings, implying that Novak was responsible for the crime. However, she refused to testify in her own defense. Dmitry Sheen also chose not to take the stand. According to reports, Judge Justice Sharp delivered a scathing rebuke to the defendants, in which she characterized the murder as a terrible, merciless crime that had been cold-bloodedly committed with a gross breach of trust. Furthermore, it was reported that during sentencing, none of the three defendants displayed any emotion. Judge Sharp imposed mandatory life sentences on the three Polish nationals with a minimum of 32 years in prison and no possibility of early release. According to Judge Sharp, the defendants had taken the life of a beautiful young woman who had everything to live for, solely for financial gain. Judge Sharp specifically rebuked Rahul Novak, saying, "The photos of you holding Catherine's hand the evening before her death and buying groceries for what you knew was her last dinner are utterly chilling. Your emotions were directed only at yourself." Turning to Anna Lagvinovich, Judge Sharp declared, "Your behavior was deceitful, manipulative, and cruel. You played your full part in this horrendous crime." The judge addressed Dmitry, stating that the murder was driven by financial gain, with aggravating circumstances and no mitigating factors. The judge emphasized that the only sympathy should be reserved for Catherine's family, including her mother Jane, father Philip, and sister Lynn, who have suffered greatly. The judge expressed deep condolences to Catherine's parents, noting that they were deceived by Rahul Novak's facade, unaware of his true nature, which was devoid of remorse and decency. The judge reiterated that the crime was motivated by greed, as Novak and Catherine had no personal ties, being neither married nor having children together. In contrast, the case of Anna Lagvinovich was driven by jealousy and a desire for revenge. At the request of the parents, Judge Justice Sharp read statements from Catherine's mother and sister. Catherine's mother was overcome with emotion in the courtroom as her statement was read, describing her daughter as a caring, loving, sincere, generous, loyal, thoughtful, exceptional, and amazing young woman. "My daughter had a bright and promising future with unlimited potential." As her parents, Phil and I couldn't help but feel immense pride in the young woman she was becoming. However, our lives were forever changed by the cruel and calculated act that took Catherine's life away from us. The hatred shown to her is something that will haunt us for the rest of our lives. I'm left with the unbearable pain of never having had the chance to say goodbye, to tell her how much I love her, or to hear her say, "I love you, Mommy," one last time. Catherine Wellsbur's father, Philip, was outraged that his daughter's boyfriend, Rahul Novak, had betrayed their trust. Novak had been living with them and was like a son, but he was accused of murdering Catherine. Despite his innocent claims, Novak showed no emotion when Catherine's body was found and initially didn't mention her when questioned by police. Instead, he asked for a steak dinner. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells Burr, testified that she had concerns about Novak when he and Catherine bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believed Catherine's life was in danger and that she had signed her own death warrant by signing the mortgage. In the end, the jury found Novak guilty of murdering Catherine by suffocating her with a pillow while she slept. He had planned the murder with his secret lover, Anna Lagvinovich, and her uncle, Tavush Dmitry Shine, to claim a life insurance payout of £123,000 and a share of the house. Vinovich and Sheen helped dispose of the body by transporting it in Vinovich's car to a remote location, where they set it on fire. Meanwhile, Novak had already started his workday, providing himself with an alibi. The three Polish nationals were found guilty of the crime by the Royal Court of Bristol. The events leading up to the murder involved secret meetings and phone calls between Novak and Vinovich, who were unaware that Catherine was involved in a love triangle. To mislead detectives, they created fake online profiles for Catherine on adult websites and sent her messages from a supposed mysterious admirer. Catherine's parents have called for stricter immigration controls following her death. They believe that if the UK had immigration rules as strict as those in the US, Novak, who was convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland, would not have been allowed into the country. The couple blames the European Union for the current lax entry measures for foreign nationals. Jane Wells Burr emphasized that people entering the UK are not properly vetted, pointing out that they were unaware of Novak's previous assault charge in Poland. Catherine's family members broke down in tears as the sentence was handed down in court, while the three convicted perpetrators remained emotionless. The trio received life sentences with no possibility of parole. In essence, the three immigrants from Poland had exchanged their aspirations for a successful and wealthy life for a lifetime of imprisonment due to their own actions. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother delivered a heartfelt tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful girl, absolutely beautiful. She recalled her daughter's accomplishments and remembered her as determined, hardworking, and full of potential for a happy life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Stacy Smith. Stacy Ann Smith was born on September 21, 1977. She was known for her beauty and outgoing personality, which made her a popular cheerleader in high school. After graduation, she met the love of her life, Stephen, and they started a family. Their daughter, Mackenzie, was born in June 2002, followed by a son, Landon, 4 years later. Stacy and Stephen eventually got married and thought their happiness would last. However, their relationship took a turn for the worse, and they eventually broke up. In 2009, she reconnected with an old high school acquaintance, Brent. Brent had secretly harbored feelings for Stacy back in high school, but she didn't reciprocate at the time. This time, their connection evolved into a romantic relationship. Stacy had divorced her ex-husband Stephen by this point, and Brent was aware that she had moved on. As she started rebuilding her personal life, Stacy's friendship with Brent blossomed into something more, offering her a new lease on love. Stacy frequently saw Brent picked up the kids for the weekend. Brent got along well with Stacy's children, which made her happy. However, their relationship eventually hit a rough patch. They argued frequently, often due to Brent's jealousy, as he tried to exert control over certain aspects of her life. When Stacy was on the phone, Brent would demand to know who she was talking to. This led to them breaking up several times. On Christmas Eve 2009, Stacy moved into a new home with her children, her cousin Timothy, and Brent. They spent the evening decorating the house for Christmas and creating a warm atmosphere. A few days later, on December 28, 2009, Stacy's father, John Paul, tried to reach his daughter by phone, but she didn't answer. As several hours passed with no response or return call from Stacy, John grew concerned and decided to check on her. He drove to the house where Stacy lived with her children to see what was wrong. John arrived at the house and found nothing out of the ordinary at first. He knocked on the front door and called out to his daughter, Stacy, but there was no response. The door was locked, so he looked through the window and spotted his 3-year-old grandson, Landon. When Landon came closer, John asked where his mom was, and Landon said she was sleeping. However, John knew something was wrong because Stacy was a light sleeper and would have woken up to the knocks on the door. John asked Landon to let him in and guided him through opening the door. Once inside, John asked Landon to wait in the living room while he went to check on Stacy. Upon entering the kitchen, John found Stacy's body lying on the floor, and he realized she was dead. He discovered bloodstains in the kitchen and Stacy's bedroom. It was clear that Stacy's death was no accident. She had a fatal stab wound to her neck. The police were immediately called, and the house was searched. As detectives investigated the scene, they found a message scrawled on one of the walls that quickly grabbed their attention. Message at the crime scene accused Stacy of being unfaithful. The message consisted of only 2 words, cheating, and a second word that started with the letter W. The fact that Landon was left alone for most of the day while his mother was dead was particularly disturbing. Forensic analysis revealed the boy's bloody footprints next to Stacy's body. The police collected all potential evidence from the house, including cigarette butts and beer cans, which could be used to obtain DNA samples. However, the writing on the wall was of greatest interest to the investigators. Identifying the person who wrote it was crucial. Based on the evidence, it was reasonable to assume that the motive behind the crime was jealousy, cruelty, and a desire for revenge. The killer may have been someone Stacy knew and trusted, as there were no signs of forced entry into her home. This suggests that she may have let the perpetrator in voluntarily. The investigation found that Stacy's car and keys were missing, and her phone and the murder weapon were not found at the scene. The police alerted all patrol units to be on the lookout for Stacy's car, as the killer may have used it to flee the scene. Psychologists spoke with Landon, Stacy's son, to see if he had witnessed anything unusual or seen the person who hurt his mother. However, Landon was unable to provide any helpful information to the police. When he woke up, he found his mother lying on the floor and initially thought she was asleep. He tried to wake her up, but she was unresponsive. At the beginning of the investigation, 2 individuals identified as potential suspects, Stacy's boyfriend, Brent, and her ex-husband, Stephen. It was possible that Stephen still harbored feelings for Stacy and was resentful that she had moved on to someone else after their divorce. Brent, on the other hand, was known to be jealous, and this was common knowledge among those who knew him. While patrol officers searched for Stacy's car, investigators spoke with her family members. Following this conversation, Brent became the primary suspect. Brent's family and friends were aware of his intense jealousy and short temper, which often led to emotional outbursts when he suspected Stacy was in contact with someone else. His volatile nature was a major concern, and Stacy had even cut off communication with him several times in the past. Given his history, the detectives wanted to know if he had any involvement and establish his whereabouts at the time of Stacy's death. With a search warrant in hand, the investigators arrived at the house, finding Brent in his garage. The investigators informed Brent about the search warrant and explained that their visit was part of the investigation into Stacy Smith's death. Brent was stunned by the news of Stacy's death, but was his apparent grief just an act? Investigators took him to the police station for questioning to find out. During the interrogation, Brent's statements only fueled the police's suspicions. He revealed that his relationship with Stacy was troubled and they frequently argued. In fact, their last quarrel occurred the day before her death. Brent claimed that Stacy had an affair with one of his friends, a betrayal that had left their relationship reeling. Brent told the investigators that on December 27th, he went home after their fight, calmed down, and then returned to Stacy's house a few hours later. They had a quiet conversation in her bedroom where intimacy was rekindled. He left around 2 a.m. Landon and her cousin Timothy were sleeping in the house and didn't notice anything unusual. Brent insisted that everything was fine between him and Stacy when he left, and he was unaware of her death until the police told him. However, no one could confirm Brent's alibi, leaving the investigators to doubt his story. The police requested that Brent take a polygraph test to gauge his responses to their questions. Initially hesitant, Brent agreed to the test in order to clear his name and avoid being perceived as a suspect. He successfully passed the polygraph test without any issues. Following the test, the police considered removing him from their list of suspects. During the polygraph test, officers observed a small red spot on Brent's shirt that resembled dried blood. Brent explained that he had sustained a minor injury the day before and claimed the spot was his own blood. To verify Brent's account, detectives decided to interview Stacy's cousin, Timothy, as he was the last person known to have seen Stacy alive. However, Timothy's whereabouts were unknown. Despite the family gathering after Stacy's death, Timothy had vanished, and his phone calls went unanswered. The family and police were worried, speculating that Timothy might have been kidnapped. Given his past struggles with substance abuse, it was possible that he owed money to someone who sought revenge. Stephen, Stacy's ex-husband, was an initial suspect in the crime. A possible motive was his anger towards Stacy for being in a relationship with Brent before their divorce was finalized. Although they no longer lived together, Stephen may have felt offended by Stacy's actions. This anger could have led him to commit the crime and leave a derogatory message at the scene. Another potential motive was Stephen's desire to have full custody of their children. As it stood, he only saw them on weekends. However, when questioned by police, Stephen remained calm and cooperative. He denied any involvement in Stacy's death, stating he would never harm Stacy. Stephen claimed that he and Stacy had maintained a cordial relationship after their divorce. He shared the same suspicions as Stacy's family, believing Brent was responsible for the crime. Stephen also mentioned that Stacy and Brent's relationship was unstable. He provided an alibi for the night of the crime, which was later confirmed by police, leading to his exclusion from the list of suspects. While searching for Stacy's car, investigators discovered a surprising twist. The vehicle they found belonged to Dr. William Casto, Stacy's boss. This revelation led to the discovery of a romantic relationship between Stacy and Dr. Casto. Colleagues reported that they were extremely close, and at one point, Dr. Casto had given Stacy a car. This new information made Dr. Casto a potential suspect in the investigation. The police considered the possibility that Dr. Casto might have found out about Stacy's relationship with Brent and reacted violently. To explore this lead, the detective began looking for Dr. Casto. However, Dr. Casto did not attempt to hide and continued with his daily routine. Upon learning of Stacy's death and the police's desire to speak with him, Dr. Casto voluntarily went to the police station. During the interrogation, Dr. Casto openly acknowledged his intimate relationship with Stacy and confirmed that he had given her the car. According to him, he and Stacy were in a long-term consensual relationship. He provided for her and was there to support her through problems. Despite their relationship, he vehemently denied any involvement in her murder, claiming he had no motive to harm her. He cooperated fully with the investigation, providing an alibi for the night of her death. The alibi checked out, and investigators were able to rule him out as a suspect. Through the use of GPS tracking technology, the location of Stacy's car was finally identified, in an abandoned parking lot roughly 5 miles from her residence. Authorities rushed to the scene, transported the car to their forensics garage for inspection. While police did find Stacy's credit cards and other belongings in the car, no physical evidence was recovered from the vehicle that suggested the presence of a weapon. Additionally, police investigating the disappearance made another discovery by digging deeper into Timothy's past. Timothy had a history of run-ins with the law and was hiding a dark past. He had previously been convicted of a sex crime and theft. The allegations stated that he had molested a minor, but Timothy claimed that that girl had lied about her age, leading him to believe she was of legal age. As a result of his conviction, Timothy served time in prison and was required to register as a sex offender. However, he failed to comply with this requirement. 2 days after Stacy's murder, Timothy contacted the police, claiming he was staying at a local motel and had no involvement in her death. A warrant was issued for Timothy's arrest. When police arrived at the motel, they found that Timothy had escaped, but they did find a woman he was in a relationship with. She informed the police that Timothy was hiding in an abandoned house on the other side of the city. On December 30th, 2009, Timothy was arrested and questioned by police about the events surrounding Stacy's death. When asked to corroborate Brent's alibi, Timothy confirmed that he had been at the house with Stacy and her son. However, Timothy then unexpectedly accused Brent of taking Stacy's life. According to Timothy, Brent was not a good person and was constantly fighting with Stacy. He even claimed to have witnessed an argument between they on the day of the incident. Timothy stated that he couldn't understand why Stacy was in a relationship with Brent, whom he believed did not love or respect her. When asked why he left the crime scene and hid, Timothy admitted that he was afraid of being arrested because he had not registered as a sex offender. However, Timothy's accusations against Brent lost credibility after the police received lab results showing that a drop of dried blood on Brent's shirt was actually his own, not Stacy's. With no evidence linking Brent to the crime, the focus of the investigation narrowed. Brent maintained that he had left the house, leaving only Stacy, Timothy, and Landon behind. 3-year-old Landon was clearly not capable of committing the crime and leaving a disturbing message on the wall. This led investigators to suspect that Timothy was hiding something. They noticed dried blood stains on Timothy's jeans and sent his clothes to the lab for further analysis. Timothy initially maintained that Brent was responsible for Stacy's death, but the investigators continued to question him. Eventually, he cracked under the pressure and revealed the truth. He explained that he had witnessed Stacy and Brent arguing on the night of her death, and Stacy had forgiven Brent as she always did. Timothy was angry with Stacy for forgiving Brent again. Later, after Brent had left, Timothy went to Stacy's bedroom to confront her. What transpired next is documented in court records without graphic details. On December 28, 2009, an argument broke out between Timothy and his cousin Stacy Smith at her home in St. Albans, West Virginia. The dispute began when Timothy made a comment about Stacy's boyfriend not treating her well. In response, Stacy called Timothy a junkie, which enraged him. He stormed out of the bedroom, went to the kitchen, and smoked a cigarette. A few minutes later, he returned to the bedroom, armed with a butcher knife. In a fatal attack, Timothy stabbed Stacy once in the right side of her neck as she lay in bed. Before fleeing the scene of the murder, Mr. Sutherland took Miss Smith's cell phone, credit card, money, and car keys. He also wrote the words, "cheating," expletive, on a living room wall in the house. Timothy told investigators that after he injured Stacy, she was able to get out of bed and walk a few more steps. Her son was sleeping in another room, and her daughter was spending the night with friends. While Timothy was telling all this to the detectives, he was crying, and it seemed he was sincerely remorseful. He also told them where he had put the weapon of the crime. He threw the knife that he used to take Stacy's life out the car window, not far from Stacy's house. Later, the police found this knife in the place Timothy specified. Laboratory analysis showed that there was Stacy's blood on his jeans. All this was enough to bring charges. When asked why he wrote these words on the wall, he replied that he wanted Stacy's boyfriend to become a suspect in the crime. Everyone knew Stacy and Brent often quarreled, and he wanted everyone to think that Brent had taken her life out of jealousy. But Brent believed that wasn't the only reason. Brent thought Timothy was in love with his cousin and was jealous of her. That night, he sat in an armchair in the living room and heard everything Brent and Stacy were doing in the bedroom. Perhaps jealousy made him lose his temper and do something. No one can fix this. The police considered the possibility that Timothy could have unsuccessfully tried to persuade Stacy into intimacy after Brent left the house. Yet, they found no evidence to confirm this. Only 2 people knew what happened that night, and one of them was dead. Although Timothy Sutherland fully admitted his guilt during interrogation, he declared his innocence at the first court hearing in 2010. But the authorities had enough evidence to convict him. The only question was who the jury would believe, the prosecutor, who claimed that the crime was premeditated, or the lawyer, who said that his client committed the crime in a state of passion. However, the fact that Timothy left her bedroom after an argument with Stacy, went to the kitchen, smoked a cigarette there, and then took a knife and returned indicated that he was aware of what he was doing. On March 18, 2011, Timothy Ray Sutherland was found guilty. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2013, he attempted to appeal the verdict but failed. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christina Carlin Craft. Christina Rose Carlin Craft was born on November 11, 1983, in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Craft and Dawn Carlin. From a young age, she enjoyed being in front of the camera, whether it was being photographed or videotaped. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City. Although she had a stable job, her true aspiration was to become a model. Christina's determination eventually paid off, and she achieved some success in the modeling industry. In her promotional materials, she expressed her love for posing in elegant lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend Christina met while working on a 3-day photo shoot for Maxim magazine, Christina was a charming and beautiful person with a great sense of humor. With her dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the qualities of a fashion model. Christina's ultimate goal was to appear on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while still working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, Christina met Alex Caiatelli, and they soon began dating. Alex supports Christina's ambitions and never hindered her career. They got engaged after a long relationship. During this time, Christina became Cyber Girl of the Month in May 2009, earning an invitation to the Playboy Mansion, where she attended exclusive events and experienced luxury. At the height of her career, Christina's ambitions soared, particularly after meeting Hugh Hefner. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, she failed to secure a modeling contract with Playboy magazine, a highly competitive opportunity that only one girl among thousands of applicants can attain. Christina faced significant obstacles in becoming a top model at that time. One major issue was her age. At 26, she was considered too old for certain magazines that typically feature younger models. Despite this, she continued to work hard, landing jobs with prominent companies like Redken, Maxim, Victoria's Secret, and Vanity Fair. Determined to advance her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, her decision to pose for Playboy proved to be a setback. Many brands were hesitant to work with her after the explicit photo shoot, and her career began to decline. Eventually, it came to a complete halt. It was a challenging time for Christina, but she was grateful to have Alex's support to help her through it. Christina was a woman known for both her physical beauty and her controversial behavior. In 2016, she caused a disturbance at the Smith, a New York restaurant. Following the incident, the New York Post published several articles about what had happened. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin Craft, 34, was dining at the Smith with a male friend on March 6 when an argument broke out over the bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager, Sergei Anakin, intervened. Christina, who was reportedly intoxicated, claimed the manager had pushed her, but a video of the incident showed that was not true. During the altercation, Christina allegedly hit a police officer on the neck, causing redness and significant pain. She was subsequently charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, after the district attorney offered her a deal, the charges were dropped on the condition that she stayed out of trouble for 6 months. Christina's lawyer explained that she accepted a reasonable deal offered by the district attorney. Christina had always been fond of Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, where she felt a strong sense of safety. Considering this, Alex purchased an apartment for her in Ardmore, and they of them relocated to Pennsylvania in 2018. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore did not live up to her expectations of being a safe haven. In fact, on August 18, 2018, she reported a robbery to the police. Christina spent the evening at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night are hazy. The next morning, she woke up with no recollection of how she got home or if anyone was with her. She suspected that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. Feeling scared, she confided in others about her concerns. Her partner, Alex, was away on a business trip at the time, which added to her anxiety. The police investigation into the incident uncovered CCTV footage that showed a car arriving at Christina's apartment building around 3 a.m. The footage revealed that Christina was unconscious in the back seat. The driver, who was later identified as the perpetrator, took Christina's keys from her purse and entered her apartment. Once inside, the thief stole over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer handbags, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The perpetrator spent about an hour and a half in Christina's apartment before returning to the car. He then helped Christina out of the vehicle and into her apartment building, leaving her in the hallway. The thief put the keys back in Christina's purse and drove away, leaving her disoriented and frightened. The police were able to identify the perpetrator of the robbery with the help of a credit card statement. The culprit was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. At the time of the robbery, Melton was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with a Virginia license plate. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17, a sighting confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. As the police searched for Melton and worked to recover Christina's stolen belongings, a far more serious crime occurred. On August 22, 2018, Alex Cayatelli called the police to ask them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin Craft, as he was unable to contact her. When he arrived home, he found the apartment door locked from the inside. A review of the security system revealed that someone had opened the front door and balcony door overnight. The police were forced to break down the front door to gain entry. Upon entering the apartment, they immediately discovered a crime scene, with a body on the bed covered in a blanket and blood visible. Christina Carlin Craft's brutally beaten body was discovered under a blanket. She had suffered severe injuries, including a broken nose and strangulation marks on her neck. When Christina's identity was confirmed, the news of her death was devastating to Alex. As the police investigated further, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Alex might be involved in her murder. After all, the closest people to the victim are often the prime suspects. Christina and Alex had a long history together, and anything could have happened between them. The fact that Alex had called the police to express his concern about Christina, only to have her body discovered shortly after, raised suspicions. It was possible that Alex had staged his concern to divert attention from himself. The detectives asked him to accompany them to the police station for questioning, and Alex agreed without hesitation. Alex told investigators he had to return to New York for urgent work on August 21st. On August 22nd, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to say goodnight, but she didn't answer. Since Christina was always awake at that hour, Alex grew concerned. He called her several more times, but got no response. He then checked the security system and found suspicious activity at the apartment that night. Alex decided to put his business on hold and return to Ardmore immediately. The police believed Alex's story and ruled him out as a suspect, as it was impossible for him to be in two places at once. His alibi checked out, and the police cleared him of any involvement in Christina's death. The main suspect in Christina's murder was initially Andre Melton, who had previously stolen valuables from her apartment. It's possible that he returned to the apartment to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Alternatively, he may have discovered that she had reported him to the police and sought revenge. On August 22nd, the day Christina's body was discovered, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his residence, they found some of Christina's belongings, but Melton was nowhere to be found. However, surveillance footage from the night of the crime revealed that Christina had returned to her apartment with an unknown man at 3:08 a.m., but it wasn't Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage showed that the unknown man did not leave the apartment. To investigate further, police reviewed CCTV footage from the streets of Ardmore and discovered that Christina had visited a bar in Philadelphia before returning to her apartment. At the bar, investigators found footage of Christina meeting a man who later hugged her, the same man she had returned to her apartment with. Christina and a new acquaintance hailed a taxi after leaving the bar. Detectives tracked her movements to rebuild the timeline of events leading up to her death. They eliminated Melton as a suspect since he wasn't with her that day. They still had to determine if her death was connected to the earlier robbery or just a coincidence. On August 25th, the police got a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who drove Christina and her companion that night. He reported that Christina and her friend had approached him, and they didn't use the taxi app. After agreeing on a fare, they got into the taxi. According to Sanford, the couple seemed affectionate and friendly, so they didn't raise any suspicions. Sanford also remembered that when they arrived at their destination, Christina took the initiative to settle the fare. However, she didn't have any cash on her. She offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford refused. Then, Christina's friend offered him $100 if he would wait 10 to 15 minutes near the house while they went to the apartment. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her friend returned. Christina and the man entered their apartment around 3 a.m. At 4 a.m., Christina made a brief call to her cousin, but didn't speak a word. Her cousin, however, heard a man in the background instructing Christina not to call the police. The call ended abruptly, leaving the cousin unclear about what was happening. The police later determined the timeline of the crime using the apartment's door sensors, which recorded the exact times the doors were opened. The data showed that the first door opening occurred at 3:08 a.m. and the next at 5:10 a.m. Since the apartment was on the second floor, the investigators suspected that the perpetrator had left through the sliding glass door on the balcony, which was also detected by the security system around the same time. This explained why the surveillance cameras did not capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left the apartment. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment. Based on this information, the police theorized that the perpetrator escaped by jumping off the balcony. The investigation's next step was to seek the public's help through the media. After releasing the surveillance camera images, the authorities asked anyone with information to come forward. The photos showed two individuals, Andre Melton and the second person who was at Christina's apartment on the night of her death. Surprisingly, Andre Melton called the police by himself, admitting to stealing from Christina but denying involvement in her murder. On August 26, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects in the recent crime. The caller revealed that he had shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. According to the caller, the suspect had previously assaulted a woman in Love Park and molesting her. The suspect became aggressive, shouting and causing a disturbance, and was eventually hospitalized for 2 hours at a cost of $70. However, he was not identified. The caller provided more chilling information. The suspect had bragged about strangling a woman and felt proud and satisfied by the act. This new information convinced investigators that the suspect was likely responsible for the murder of Christina Carlincraft. The police received another call from a Philadelphia relative of the suspect, who identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, a convicted felon with a history of robbery. Harris had been released from prison on July 15, just 5 weeks before Christina's murder. After studying the suspect's entire biography, it became clear that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no prior connection and had never met. As a result, the police ruled out any link between their crimes. Additionally, the police gained access to Harris's phone messages. On August 22, he texted a friend that he had met an attractive woman and was going to her apartment. On August 28, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris. It was essential to apprehend him as soon as possible, as no one knew what he might do next. However, Harris had left no trail. When investigators contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, she revealed that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. As it turned out, Harris was already on the bus when the conversation took place. The Indore police were unable to act, and the officers wouldn't be able to catch up with him. The Pittsburgh police were their last hope. Timing was crucial, and the police investigating Christina's death contacted the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They informed the task force of the bus's expected arrival time in Pittsburgh and shared a photo of Harris, helping them plan a strategic ambush. The officers blocked off all potential escape routes and were prepared to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. As the bus approached, one of the employees spotted Harris and allowed him to disembark calmly, reducing the likelihood of panic or chaotic behavior. About 10 minutes later, a police officer intercepted Harris. Harris gave a false name when asked to identify himself. He was arrested and taken to the police station, where detectives from Philadelphia interrogated him about his involvement in Christina's case. Harris claimed that he met Christina at a bar or nightclub, where she was alone, and he approached her. He admitted to being under the influence of both illegal substances and alcohol at the time. After chatting and having a drink, Christina invited him to her place. Once they arrived, Harris asked the taxi driver to wait, intending to return shortly. However, he ended up staying with Christina, and they drank multiple bottles of wine together. He claimed that they then engaged in an intimate relationship with mutual consent and used a prohibited substance. Afterward, Harris demanded that Christina pay him $1,200, which she refused. The situation escalated into a physical altercation when Christina allegedly hit Harris with a wine bottle. In response, Harris claimed he hit her in the face, causing her to fall to the floor. When Christina attempted to call for emergency assistance, Harris strangled her with sweatpants until she lost consciousness. Despite his account, several inconsistencies were found in his story. During the toxicology examination, experts found no prohibited substances in Christina's body, only alcohol. This contradicted the suspect's initial claim that he had only hit her once. When confronted with the results, Harris admitted to lying. Harris initially tried to convince detectives of his innocence, claiming Christina was fine when he left her apartment. However, during a subsequent interrogation, he fully confessed to his guilt. He explained that he had panicked after severely beating her, leaving her while she was still breathing, and covering her with a blanket to avoid the sight. Ultimately, Jonathan Harris confessed to taking Christina's life and attempting to escape detection by jumping off the balcony. Despite his earlier confession, Harris pleaded not guilty at the trial. Nevertheless, the investigators had gathered substantial evidence, making it impossible for Harris and his lawyer to win the case. The court was expected to sentence Jonathan Harris to 22 to 40 years in prison for the crime of third-degree life deprivation. However, the large amount of evidence presented by the prosecutors convinced the court that the crime was intentional, making life imprisonment a possibility. During the trial, a key witness testified against Harris. This witness had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic and had previously reported Harris to the police. Harris had confessed to the crime while in the clinic, telling the witness that he enjoyed the feeling of squeezing someone and watching them take their last breath. In the end, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to 30 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge handed down an additional 22 to 45-year sentence to Harris. The lengthy sentence was intended to send a message to future authorities who might consider granting him early release or pardon. In a separate case, Andre Melton was arrested in December 2018 and charged with burglarizing Carlin Craft's apartment. He was sentenced in March 2020 to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, totaling 7 years under court supervision. Before receiving his sentence, Melton apologized to Carlin Craft's family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Susan Wright. The case of Susan Wright in the early 2000s shocked everyone with its cruelty, but the perpetrator received deserved punishment. Years later, this story wasn't clear-cut, and a bloody conclusion was preceded by patience, resignation, and silence. This seemingly ideal family hid dark secrets behind closed doors. Let's understand the case of the Blue-Eyed Butcher to comprehend what pushed a fragile young mother to a monstrous act. Susan Lucille Wright, née Weddle, was born on April 24, 1976, in Houston, Texas, to Velma Sue and Jimmy Lawrence Weddle, a simple family. She was the elder of 2 children, raised with her biological sister Cindy. From a young age, Susan was an active and sociable child with creative talents. During her school years, she was deeply engaged in dancing and aspired to become a choreographer in the future. The girl had a bright, attractive appearance and a slender figure, with numerous admirers, and she enjoyed being the center of attention. After finishing high school, Susan was unable to get into college. Nevertheless, she did not give up and decided to take a break to save money for her education. For months, she worked as a dancer in a famous club in the city, where she performed topless, which left her unsatisfied. She then left that job and used her savings to pay for night classes at a nursing school. Alongside her studies, she worked as a waitress to support herself, but realized that nursing was not her true calling, needing to abandon the courses and focus on the job. In the summer of 1997, 21-year-old Susan met her future husband, Jeffrey Andrew Wright. Their first encounter was at the Galveston restaurant where she worked as a waitress, and he stopped by for a meal. He was instantly captivated by the beauty and radiant smile of the blue-eyed blonde, leaving generous tips and becoming a regular customer from then on. Jeffrey took a while to ask her out, but eventually mustered the courage to get her phone number. Susan later recalled that Jeffrey began calling her daily, sometimes several times a day, arranging romantic dates and small surprises like sending flowers with touching notes to her workplace. In the evenings, he would meet her and walk her home. Jeffrey was 8 years her senior, but this minor age difference did not particularly bother them. He was attentive, very sweet, and caring, quickly winning over Susan. Around this time, they acquired their own home in the peaceful Harris County, Texas, moving in just a couple of weeks before the birth of their child. The ideal family. In December 1998, the Wrights welcomed their first child together, a son named Bradley. In 2001, Susan became pregnant again, and in the spring of 2002, she gave birth to a daughter, Kay. The couple also got a small dog named Buck, had their own comfortable family car, and seemingly lived a life that exemplified the American dream. Jeffrey worked at a local construction company, and after the birth of their children, Susan, by mutual agreement, became a homemaker. She took care of raising the kids and creating a comfortable environment in their home. Neighbors with whom Mrs. Wright maintained friendly relations spoke of her as a kind, friendly, and sociable young woman, a caring mother, and a loving wife. The family indeed seemed perfect, but as it turned out, the reality was quite different. Her husband was extremely controlling in all areas of her life. Susan's daily routine revolved around cleaning, laundry, and cooking. Jeffrey insisted on freshly home-cooked meals and refused to eat leftovers or meals prepared in advance. The house had to be meticulously clean and organized, which was challenging with 2 young children. Jeffrey also demanded that his clothes be washed almost daily, as he would not wear the same item twice. Failure to comply with these strict rules often resulted in insults, humiliation, and even physical abuse. Financially, Jeffrey was extremely stingy. The romantic partner who once gifted flowers and presents had disappeared, and he now only gave his wife $100 a week. This was meant to cover cooking, maintaining the house, and buying everything necessary for the children. Susan had to account for all expenses to her husband and provide receipts. Jeffrey did not quit drinking as he had promised earlier, and that was just the beginning of the issues. He began using drugs again, categorically denying his addiction and referring to his drug use as light doping to cope with work stress and stay in good shape. However, under the influence of these substances, he often became aggressive, capable of hitting his wife or even their young son. Whenever Susan pleaded with him to seek professional help and undergo rehabilitation to overcome his destructive habits, Jeffrey reacted with outbursts of anger, arguing that Susan married him knowing about his alcohol and drug use, and thus she should now accept and live with it. Remarkably, Jeffrey's parents were also aware of their son's weaknesses, but they sympathized with their daughter-in-law, feeling helpless to assist her. The last straw, according to the woman, was that her husband began displaying aggression towards her almost immediately after they started living together. This manifested in physical, emotional, and intimate abuse. Initially, he would apologize each time, promising it would never happen again, and she wanted to believe him, but soon Jeffrey stopped apologizing, and the violence in the family became a commonplace occurrence. Jeffrey visited the gym 3 times a week to practice boxing, saying these workouts allowed him to blow off steam, adding that he would definitely take his son with him once the boy was a bit older. On Monday, January 13, 2003, Wright went to the gym after work, as he usually did. When he returned home, he seemed excited and nervous. While his wife was preparing dinner, he decided to tell his son about boxing and demonstrate a few techniques. At one point, he misjudged his strength and accidentally hit the 5-year-old boy. The child burst into tears, and the father tried to calm him, hoping his wife wouldn't hear. Susan, indeed, pretended not to notice, but this incident was the final straw for her. After dinner, she went to put the children to bed while her husband remained in the bedroom, where he consumed more controlled substances. Susan claimed that when she entered the room, her husband attacked her, sexually assaulted her, and tried to kill her with a knife, but she was able to disarm him, and the ensuing confrontation was in self-defense. However, her story changed several times, and the investigation's theory presented at the trial seemed more credible, becoming the official account. Seduced, restrained, and violently ended a life, Susan decided to use her dancing skills to seduce her husband and lower his defenses. She entered the room wearing a short silk robe over her bare body, performing a tantalizing show for her husband. Then, she proposed a role-playing game involving tying him up, to which he readily agreed. She used 3 of Jeff's neckties to bind his hands and right leg to the bed, and his left leg was secured with the silk belt from her robe. Once he was immobilized, Susan improvised a gag using her own underwear, adding to the guise of an intimate game. To set the mood, she lit candles and turned off the lights. Jeffrey was bound hand and foot, securely fastened to the bed with a gag in his mouth, surrounded by dim lighting. Initially, Mrs. Wright took one of the candles and poured hot wax on the man's chest. Although painful, it still resembled a part of their game. Then the same fate befell his intimate area, and soon the pain became unbearable. Jeffrey did not immediately realize what was happening. He tried to free himself, tried to scream, but to no avail. Meanwhile, his wife repeatedly struck him with a small, sharp knife she had brought from the kitchen. She started with the groin area, moving up and down, slashing his genitals, legs, abdomen, chest, arms, neck, and face. At first, Susan acted slowly, voicing her grievances with each strike, recounting the insults, humiliations, and abuse she had endured. Then she began to cry and struck faster and faster. Forensic experts would later count 193 shallow knife wounds on the Jeffrey. The majority of these wounds were not fatal, and Jeffrey was conscious for most of the ordeal. Her actions indicated she was in a state of despair and intense emotional turmoil. With her lawyers insisting on a state of effect, she couldn't stop even when her husband showed no signs of life, and she hadn't yet considered what she would do next or how she would handle the body. Susan cautiously peered out the window, ensuring no neighbors had their lights on and that it was quiet and deserted outside. Her gaze fell upon a shallow pit that Jeffrey had dug over the weekend to install a fountain in the backyard. A plan formed instantly. This pit was to become the grave for her despised spouse. To move the body from the bedroom to the yard, Susan used a common garden wheelbarrow. This action raised many questions for the investigators, as a petite, slender woman was able to single-handedly load and transport a man who was much taller and twice her weight out of the house. There were suspicions of an accomplice, but these speculations were never confirmed. Under the cover of night, Susan moved her husband's body into the pit and buried it, though lightly covered would be more accurate. She then shouted, removed the blood-stained curtains and bed linen, placing them in several trash bags and dispersing them in different bins. The bloodied mattress was simply flipped over to the other side, as she didn't know what else to do with it. The remaining time until dawn was spent scrubbing blood from the floor, walls, and carpet. The carpet presented a problem, as a large stain proved impossible to remove. Resourcefully, the lady soaked it in bleach, hoping the chemicals would destroy any traces of the violent confrontation that had occurred in that room. Later that morning, Susan called her husband's parents, who lived in Austin, Texas, sobbing. She informed them that her husband, while under the influence of alcohol and controlled substances, had physically assaulted her and their young son. He then caused significant damage in the house, spilling a bottle of bleach on the carpet before declaring that he was fed up and leaving her. Jeffy's parents were shocked. They were aware that their son was not perfect, and they genuinely felt sorry for their daughter-in-law. But upon hearing that he had hit the child, they immediately offered for Susan and the children to come and stay with them for a while. However, Susan refused. She added that she would file a report with the police and disclose everything that had been occurring in their home. 2 days later, Susan went to the police station as her husband's sudden disappearance was raising more and more questions, and something had to be done. She reported that she and her children were victims of domestic violence at the hands of her husband and needed protection. Susan managed to obtain a restraining order against her husband from approaching her and the children, although she already knew very well that her significant other would never be able to come near them again. Susan showed bruises and cuts on her arms, which she claimed were inflicted by her husband with keys when she tried to fend him off. There was also a small bruise on Bradley's face, and the boy confirmed that his dad had hit him. At first glance, the story told by the tearful woman sounded quite plausible and logical. Her husband, under the influence of a mix of alcohol and controlled substances, had attacked his wife and young son, and then, realizing what he had done, got scared and fled. However, as time passed, Jeffrey made no contact, which became very suspicious. It appeared he had run away without his belongings, documents, and even his mobile phone was left at home. The man hadn't shown up for work or at his parents', and none of his friends or neighbors had seen him. It was as if he had vanished into the air. Such behavior is typical of criminals who decide to go into hiding, but in this case, the individual had not ended a life or inflicted serious injuries to justify such a drastic action. The disturbing truth was that Susan found it unbearable to remain in the house where she had confronted her husband and where his body was buried in the yard. She began to feel as if he were still alive and about to rise from his grave for revenge, and their dog, Buck, kept barking and attempting to dig up the burial site. On January 17th, Susan went to her mother's house. Her mother was aware of what had happened, but upon seeing her daughter, she realized the full extent of the truth. Velma simply asked, "You killed your husband, didn't you?" Her daughter burst into tears and nodded. She confessed what had happened and revealed where she had hidden the body, repeatedly saying she didn't know what to do next. On her mother's advice, the next day, Susan contacted a lawyer named Neil Davis, to whom she confessed to ending her husband's life and trying to conceal her crime. The experienced defense attorney learned all the details, considered the possible scenarios, and on January 19th, called the office of the Harris County District Attorney. Davis reported that Susan had ended her husband's life and buried his body in the backyard, as she herself had confessed, and was ready to give a statement at the police station. On January 24, 2003, Susan voluntarily went to the police, stating that she would make a full confession. Her story was disjointed, and she got confused in the details, sometimes contradicting herself. She spoke of her late husband as if he were still alive, claimed she was afraid of him, and asked for protection. Consequently, she was subjected to a psychiatric evaluation, which revealed a nervous breakdown and depression, but overall, Wright was capable of understanding her actions. When the body of the deceased husband was exhumed from the makeshift grave in the backyard, investigators were shocked, having never encountered such brutality before. Experts counted 193 knife wounds on the victim's body, with 8 in the groin area, around 30 on the legs, 23 on the shoulders and arms, 22 in the abdominal region, 46 on the chest, 23 on the neck, and 41 on the face. Only one head wound could have been the cause of death, while all other cuts were superficial and individually did not pose a direct threat to life, suggesting that the man endured a prolonged and agonizing death while conscious as his wife repeatedly struck him with a small knife. Deep marks were found on Jeffy's wrists and ankles from the ties and belt used by his wife to bind him. The nature of these injuries indicated that the victim had tried to free himself, but was unsuccessful. Notably, the ties and belt remained on the body. Traces of candle wax were also found on the deceased's chest and groin area, and Susan claimed it was accidental, as her husband had knocked over a lit candle onto himself, but the prosecution believed that the hot wax was more likely a form of torture inflicted on the bound victim, meant to cause suffering. In the mouth of the deceased, his wife's underwear was still present, acting as a gag that prevented him from screaming or calling for help. Toxicological reports revealed traces of alcohol and several controlled substances in Wright's body. Under the influence of such a cocktail, he could have indeed behaved aggressively and irrationally. The bedroom where the confrontation took place seemed normal at first glance, except for a large bleach stain on the carpet that Susan had spent a lot of time cleaning. However, once chemical agents and specialized equipment were used to reveal traces of erased blood, the scene presented itself in a completely different way. Blood was found everywhere, even on the ceiling, and the mattress was completely soaked in it. The trial of the accused began at the end of February 2004. By that time, Susan had been in custody for a year, and her children were being cared for by her parents and sister Cindy. Her lawyer was well prepared for the trial and had worked extensively with his client. Susan was almost continuously in tears as she recounted that horrific night and the events leading up to it. According to Susan, she had suffered years of abuse and cruel treatment from her husband. But when he started raising his hand to the children, she couldn't bear it. The defendant claimed that on the fateful evening, her husband returned from training in an agitated state, began demonstrating boxing techniques to their 5-year-old son, and said the boy would also take up boxing. When a frightened Bradley refused, his father hit him in the face. Susan then put the children to bed and decided to have a serious talk with her husband, urging him to seek help at a clinic. However, he became angry, grabbed his keys, and was about to leave. She tried to stop him, leading to a struggle during which she sustained injuries to her palms and wrists. Then, as the defendant claimed, her husband struck her, causing her to fall and momentarily lose her bearings. When she regained her senses, she saw Jeffrey holding a knife. Susan's testimony became highly inconsistent thereafter, and she couldn't explain how the weapon ended up in her hands. Her lawyer attributed this to a state of affect, arguing that it was why his client, having seized the knife, began to strike and didn't stop until she had inflicted multiple wounds all over her husband's body. Regarding the ties and belt, Susan claimed she attached them to the victim's limbs after the confrontation to secure him to the cart and transport him to the yard. The wax, as previously mentioned, supposedly landed on his body accidentally from a candle on her bedside table that she lit in the evenings instead of a nightlight. However, she couldn't explain at all why her underwear was found in the deceased's mouth. The prosecution's version and arguments were far more convincing and logical. Experts proved that the deep wounds and abrasions on the wrists and ankles were inflicted while Jeffrey was still alive, suggesting that the binding was part of an intimate game used by the defendant to lure the victim into a trap. Consequently, the presence of a gag in Jeffrey's mouth was also reasonably explained. Furthermore, all injuries were inflicted at a certain angle, as if the perpetrator was above Jeffrey's body, sitting astride him, not in the midst of a struggle, which would have resulted in a different pattern of injuries. All the cuts were made from the front, as the victim was lying on his back and securely fixed. Whether Susan had premeditated her husband's demise and planned to use the pit he dug for the fountain as a grave was not definitively established. However, the prosecution leaned towards the theory that she had carefully planned everything, hoping to receive a substantial sum from insurance. The case drew widespread public attention, with Susan dubbed in the media as the blue-eyed butcher or blonde meat grinder. Jeffrey's family demanded harsh punishment, while neighbors saw bruises on Susan's body that she blamed on clumsiness, evoking pity. The prosecution initially sought life imprisonment, later reducing it to 45 years, and in 2004, Susan was sentenced to 25 years, showing no reaction. A year later, Susan's lawyers attempted to file an appeal, but it was rejected. In 2008, Susan and her defense team filed another appeal, and this time, a new witness's testimony significantly influenced the course of the case. The witness was a woman named Misty McKell, the wife of former NFL champion Steve McKell. In the mid-1990s, Susan had a long-term relationship with Jeffrey Wright, to the point of becoming engaged for about a year. She spoke about experiencing physical abuse, humiliation, and cruel treatment from Wright, which led her to end the engagement and permanently cut ties with him. Given these new circumstances and the witness testimony, Susan's prison sentence was reduced to 20 years in 2014. At the age of 38, she became eligible for parole for the first time, but her request was ultimately denied. She received a second denial in July 2017. Finally, in the winter of 2020, after spending 16 years in prison, the woman was released. She was 44 years old at the time of her release. Waiting for her outside the prison walls were reporters and photographers, at the sight of whom she burst into tears and pleaded to be left alone. It's worth noting that Susan's trial received extensive media coverage and was even broadcast on the national American television network, Court TV. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michael Van Eck. The city of Welcome gained widespread attention due to a grievous crime that occurred there in 2011. When the criminals were identified, the prosecution was baffled. This notorious case became the 10th in the history of international criminal activity. During the investigation, it was discovered that the case involved followers of Satanism and occultism. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987 in the city of Welcome. He became the only brother to 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Ariana. The boy grew up in a large and close-knit family. His parents were caring and loving people who provided a decent life for their children. The head of the family worked hard and organized his own business. The mother created a favorable atmosphere in the home for the growth and development of the younger generation. Michael was sociable and kind and showed diligence in school and sports. He even earned a black belt in karate, which he was very proud of. This gave him confidence and resilience. After finishing school, the young man trained as an electrician. This in-demand profession opened the doors to good earnings and promising work. The young man worked at mine number 4 of the Beatrix mine in the small town of Thunison. He did not stop there and continued his education to become an engineer. In 2011, Michael signed up on a dating site. He did this to distract himself from a breakup and to meet new people. It appeared that fortune was on his side. One day, among the many photos and profiles, the lonely young man became interested in the profile of a sweet and smiling girl. As they corresponded, the young man discovered that their interests aligned. Like him, she disliked noisy parties and drunken gatherings, and sought true love and a strong family. Michael was pleasantly surprised to find a suitable match on the internet, especially since he still lived with his parents. He shared his joys and concerns with his mother on April 2nd. The son boasted to her that he was going on a date, and he prepared thoroughly for it to please the girl. He withdrew his first paycheck of 8,000 rand from his card. The only thing that troubled the young man was the unusual place his friend chose for their first meeting. It was the city cemetery. Apparently not to worry his parents, he kept quiet about it. Around 9 p.m. that same day, Michael said goodbye to his family and left the house. He headed to the designated place in a silver Peugeot 2007, a gift from his parents for his coming of age, as tradition demanded. The girl was a little late, but her appearance was impressive. The stranger from the internet arrived in a pristine white dress and smiled. The conversation was relaxed, after which she suggested continuing the evening further and invited the young man to a distant part of the cemetery. There, a meadow awaited them with a spread blanket. On it lay a basket of fruits and wine. After the young people had a glass each, the beautiful companion kissed a stunned Michael. Suddenly, the pleasant feeling of the kiss turned to pain and horror. The unsuspecting young man became part of a sinister plan, since the innocent appearance of his pen pal did not match her inner world. Shanae Van Heerden was born in 1991 during a crisis period for her parents. When her mother found out she was pregnant, the couple decided to delay their divorce and give their relationship another chance. However, their attempts to reconcile and improve their life together were unsuccessful. The family environment only worsened. Her mother openly disliked the little girl, seeing her as a tie to her husband. After the divorce, she took the children and moved away from her former husband. However, the failed marriage was not the main reason for her coldness. She continued to lack love and attention towards her children even after the relationship ended. All 3 children felt lonely and misunderstood, but Shanae suffered the most. She grew up withdrawn and sullen. From an early age, she exhibited psychological issues. She talked about death and drew incomprehensible pictures. Eventually, the little girl developed an imaginary friend named Azazel. Concerned about their daughter's behavior, her grandparents thought she was possessed. Thus, they decided to take her to church, where she underwent an exorcism ritual. According to a witness, her body convulsed during the prayers. In reality, Shanae was scared of crowds and clearly frightened by the ordeal. The shock could have triggered an epileptic seizure. The traumatic event deeply impacted the young girl's memory, causing her to develop a fear of the dark. Additionally, her mother once told her that toys come to life at night, which led the frightened daughter to tape her doll's eyes shut and tie their bodies with shoelaces. As she grew older, her mental condition worsened. At age 10, she nearly harmed a houseguest with a knife while visiting her father. Only after this incident did they seek psychiatric help for Shanae. Following a specialist's evaluation, she was prescribed sedatives. The medication had a positive effect on her mood and well-being. She became calmer and more friendly. During a remission period, her father spent more time with his daughter. He often picked her up from school and took her hunting with him. By sharing his hobby, he aimed to give her the attention she lacked. The unstable teenager enjoyed her father's activity. She later confessed that she found pleasure in butchering carcasses and skinning animals. This led her to bring home dead animals, starting with rats and birds, and eventually progressing to cats and dogs. She enjoyed cutting flesh and occasionally inflicted injuries on herself. During an investigation, her sister revealed that at age 12, Shanae befriended an older man who introduced her to forbidden substances and took advantage of her condition. Her sisters did not inform their parents, but Shanae ended the destructive relationship. This experience undoubtedly had a negative impact on her troubled psyche. At age 15, her mother moved to New Zealand, where she met another man and stayed with him. Over time, she never returned for her children. They remained with their father and stepmother, who tried their best to provide for the children, though they did not fully understand the severity of the youngest daughter's issues. Her behavior was largely attributed to adolescence. The situation worsened a year later when Shanae became involved with a 22-year-old young man interested in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. The boyfriend became a real mentor to the impressionable young woman, but he was cruel in character, often suppressing and demeaning her. Nonetheless, a supportive family environment and psychotherapy yielded positive results. By her 17th birthday, Shanae's life began to improve. She broke off dangerous connections, graduated from high school, and enrolled in college, where she studied art and graphic design. After Shanae lost interest in Satanism and stopped using forbidden substances, her emotional state improved. She excelled in her studies and secured a job in her field. At her new job, Shanae found support not only from her colleagues, but also from management. It turned out she had a real talent for visual arts, which brought her respect and recognition in her professional field. At the same time, she started dating a man named Warren. To outsiders, her life appeared completely normal. Her family and close friends did not discuss her past, hoping that the difficult times were behind her. However, what was happening in her soul was hard to say. Perhaps her inner demons were merely lying dormant. Her father was the happiest for Shanae. He hoped that she had finally matured and would soon marry. However, his expectations were not met. The obstacle emerged from an unexpected source. Warren had a friend named Roy, who considered himself highly sensitive. Despite Shanae's sweet and friendly demeanor, he sensed something repellent and malevolent in her. Yet Roy's words were not taken seriously, as her outward appearance did not match his perceptions. One day, he pulled her aside and asked, "Who is Norman?" Each time he saw her, this name popped into the clairvoyant's mind. The young man thought she might not be faithful to his friend, so he decided to ask her directly. In response, Shanae unexpectedly spat in his face and demanded he stop bothering her with foolish questions. It later became known that Norman was the second name of Zazzle, her imaginary childhood friend. Following the incident, the dynamics between the young people changed. At one of the parties, Shanae's attention shifted to a 24-year-old named Martin. Although the young man was generally calm and sociable, there were unpleasant rumors about him. Martin van der Marway was born into a well-off and respected family. Unlike Shanae, he had excellent relationships with both parents. As a child, he was smart and well-mannered, performing well academically. However, it turned out that since the age of 6, he had been suffering from a mental illness. Around that time, he began experiencing hallucinations. His parents recounted that, according to their son, a certain entity appeared to him, convincing the boy that he was endowed with incredible strength. Martin believed this and felt special. Gradually, his mental condition worsened and his behavior changed due to problems at school and home. At the age of 14, Vander Marway was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility where he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Unfortunately, conventional treatment did not help. Since the family was financially secure, his parents dedicated all their efforts to finding effective medications. Thanks to the efforts of both family and doctors, the necessary drugs were eventually found. With these, nearly all deviations were controlled, except for sporadic outbursts of aggression. Martin's once witnessed a stray cat being mauled by dogs, which made a deep impression on him. Instead of feeling disgust or pity, he hid the animal's body and watched it. This led him to start torturing animals. He later dropped out of school and began helping his father in the carpentry shop. In the future, Martin dreamed of continuing the family tradition. While working, his condition improved. He no longer wanted to do bad things to animals and take their lives. For this reason, he stopped taking medication. Everyone was wary of his decision, but the young man insisted that the disease had receded and that he was in control. Unfortunately, this turned out to be an inevitable mistake. His mental state gradually deteriorated. It was around this time that Martins met Shanae. These unstable young people found each other and began dating. However, outwardly they looked happy, so their parents were happy with their relationship. Of course, neither of them admitted to the problems their children had faced in the past. In the end, their union led to horrifying consequences. At first, the couple was open to the outside world, socializing and attending parties. Acquaintances recalled that they sometimes noticed cuts on the hands of the young people. They joked that they were engaged in intimate experiments. After that, they began to distance themselves from people. They became interested in Satanism, voodoo cults, and occult practices. They also became interested in infamous serial criminals. In February 2011, Martins posted a picture with Shanae on one of his social media pages. The pair were hugging, and the caption under the photo read, "Killers," with an ambiguous emoji. At the time, no one took their post seriously. Eventually, the young man asked his girlfriend's father for a marriage license. Mr. Van Heeren was incredibly happy. Gradually, their sick fantasies turned into a bloodthirsty plan. The crazy couple decided to torture the homeless to death, and they practiced on animals. However, their plan was never realized, as the criminals could not find a suitable victim. Their monstrous plan was waiting for the right moment. The encounter began when Shanae posted her profile on a dating site. Before long, a young man named Michael Van Eck responded. The attractive young man caught the interest of the nefarious couple, and Shanae targeted him for their plans. From the very first messages, the young people started flirting. After a few days of communication, the girls suggested they meet. Michael had been looking forward to this, but he hadn't expected it to come so soon or directly from her. Unfortunately, the somewhat unusual location for their first date didn't raise any alarms for him. Apparently, he was so eager to meet the charming conversationalist from the internet in person that he agreed to the dubious proposal. Shanae and Martin meticulously prepared to bring their wild dream to life. They thought through everything thoroughly: the attire, the means to end a life, and even the setting. Shanae approached the date fully prepared. The long-awaited meeting went exactly as planned for both parties. The victim fell for the bait. An angelic appearance of the girl and a kiss lulled his alertness. This gesture was the agreed-upon signal for Martin. All this time, the man had been hiding behind the tombstones. He approached Michael from behind and struck him with a knife. Unexpectedly for everyone, the young man resisted. The attackers hadn't anticipated this. Noticing that their new acquaintance was putting up a desperate fight, Shanae intervened. Altogether, they inflicted about 30 knife wounds on the unfortunate young man. Ultimately, completely weakened, Michael begged them to end his suffering. Martin slit Michael's throat. After that, the unthinkable began. The perpetrators dragged the body onto the blanket and proceeded with their plan. The couple severed the young man's right and left legs at the knee and decapitated him. The severed parts were placed in bags. They then decided to hide the body at the site. However, they miscalculated one thing. They had no shovels. Thus, they had to dig the earth with their hands and knives. As a result, they could not make the grave deep enough. After burying the body halfway, the perpetrators left with their trophies. Along the way, they used the victim's vehicle. Martins initially took the wheel, but later handed control over to his companion. The surge of adrenaline prevented him from keeping his eyes on the road. Upon arriving home, they stored the bags with body parts in the refrigerator as if they were groceries. After Vander Marway had somewhat recovered, he started Michael's car and drove it to a troubled neighborhood. The criminals hoped the car would be stolen, so he left it unlocked with the keys in the ignition. The next day, a cemetery worker noticed a fresh burial that wasn't there the day before. His dreadful suspicions were confirmed when he stumbled upon bloody traces and torn clothing in the bushes. He then called over his supervisor to examine the grave. What the unintended witnesses found would long remain etched in their memory. Beneath the soil lay a dismembered male body. The authorities were immediately notified of the grim discovery. At the same time, Michael's parents were beside themselves with worry. Since the previous evening, he hadn't responded to calls. Even if it was presumed that he had stayed overnight at his internet girlfriend's place, he should have made contact by now. Instead, Michael's workplace called his parents. The concerned management wanted to understand why he was absent from a crucial site. Simultaneously, the police received a report about a Peugeot 207 found abandoned in a parking lot. Passers-by were alarmed by the bloodstains on the trunk. After running the vehicle through their database, the owner was identified. Detectives also tracked that before its discovery, the car had been at the cemetery for a long time. The local precinct was already aware of an unidentified body found on its grounds. All signs were suspicious. Armed with this information, law enforcement officials went to the residence of Michael Van Eck. Upon arrival, the officers confirmed their suspicions. His parents had been searching for the young man since the previous day. They asked Michael's mother to come to the cemetery, where forensic specialists and search dogs were already at work, desperately trying to locate missing body parts. At the scene, the woman recognized belongings found, and she also identified her son's body by distinctive burn marks he had sustained in childhood. During the autopsy, the medical examination revealed that the young man had suffered numerous knife wounds, with clear signs of a struggle. It was also determined that the body had been dismembered post-mortem. At least the perpetrators spared him this agony while he was alive. Notably, experts observed that the dismemberment was executed with professional precision, suggesting significant experience. There was no doubt that multiple attackers were involved, as indicated by the number and nature of the wounds and the strength required to subdue the victim. Ultimately, DNA testing confirmed the identity of 23-year-old Michael Van Eck. During the investigation, police confiscated the victim's cell phone and computer. It was established that the last person the young man had communicated with was Shawnee Van Heerden. According to their messages, she was the one who invited him to the ominous date at the cemetery. Subsequently, detectives contacted the potential suspect and invited her to give a statement. The young woman did not refuse and arrived with her boyfriend, Martins van der Merwe. The couple was interviewed separately. During the questioning, they confessed to being involved in the group ending of a life. Upon learning of the incident, the girl's father rushed to the station. He couldn't believe what he was hearing and asked his daughter if she really was involved in the accusations against her. Shawnee calmly confirmed and added that she would willingly do it again. She claimed she had dreamt of this ever since she started hunting with him. The cruel confession of the seemingly sweet girl shocked not only her father, but everyone present. Her boyfriend, Martins, also behaved defiantly as the case gained public attention. He did not hide his pleasure from the public scrutiny and posed for the cameras. It was clear that none of the accused felt remorse for their actions. It turned out that after the crime, if caught, the mad couple planned to end their lives, but the young man changed his mind, and his partner followed suit. They wanted to live. During the search of the young couple's apartment, police felt uneasy, to say the least. The environment was horrifying. The walls were adorned with portraits of Shanae depicting her in various guises. In some, she was depicted without eyes, in others without a mouth or ears. All images of the girl were distorted. Additionally, the rooms contained ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and various objects of unclear purpose. Also found were belongings of the deceased young man, glasses, and a wallet. As Martins later confessed, they took Michael's money to buy necessary items for their next crime. However, the most horrifying discovery awaited in the refrigerator. From it, police retrieved Michael's head with the mouth sewn shut. It was assumed that the couple planned to use the young man's head as a ritual bowl. Later on, eyes and ears of the victim were stored in separate containers. The victim's hand and leg were found buried near the murderer's home, alongside the bodies of various animals. The girl's diary contained horrific thoughts and their impending realization. From everything discovered during the inspection, it was clear that the couple planned not just one more crime. The process of ending lives and subsequent mutilation of bodies provided them with unimaginable pleasure. Martins and Shanae underwent multiple evaluations for mental competence. Fortunately, the commission confirmed that the young individuals were aware of their actions and desired the inevitable consequences. Otherwise, they might have avoided punishment and received only mandatory treatment. In November 2011, the trial concerning Shanae took place, treating her as a serial offender despite this being a singular incident. She did not hide her desire to repeat her actions. She told the court that she understands she should feel shame or remorse, but for some reason, she does not comprehend the gravity of her actions through her own moral compass. She can only grasp the severity of her deeds through societal standards and the reactions of others. Psychiatrists declared that the defendant suffers from psychopathic and antisocial disorders, making her apparently more dangerous than her boyfriend, but she is adept at concealing it. Throughout the sentencing, she remained impassive. Shanae Van Heerden was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole, 20 years for ending a life, and an additional 15 for robbery and dismemberment. As for Martins, unlike his partner, he defended himself in court. He claimed not to remember the events that occurred until he found himself in jail and behaved arrogantly and aggressively. The defendant admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, trying to understand life and death. He said his relationship with Shanae pushed them both towards committing the crime. During the trial, he apologized to the victim's parents, although his words sounded insincere. He implied that the victim was simply at the wrong place at the wrong time, although in reality, the mad couple had lured the unfortunate man into a premeditated trap. The victim's mother could not contain her distress and struck the accused during one of the sessions. Ultimately, Martins van der Merwe was also found guilty of the charges against him and sentenced to 35 years in prison, but with a chance for parole after serving half of his sentence. Until 2014, the lovers kept in touch behind bars. In his letters, Martins called Shanae a dark goddess, writing, "Lady Blackmore, when you part your lips, words of a dead butterfly spill out. They fall upon my mystical heart and paint it with sweet poison, spreading beautiful darkness through my empty veins." Over time, Shanae ended the relationship with her former lover, feeling that they had grown cold and distant from each other. It is known that in prison, the woman behaves exemplarily, teaching her fellow inmates art and theology. Collectors fascinated by the lives of humanity's worst maniacs and offenders have paid large sums for a photograph of the woman with her autograph, as well as a print of her hand. What is also monstrous in this story is how many troubled individuals there are among us. Sometimes behind an innocent facade lies sheer hell. New acquaintances do not always positively affect our lives. Sometimes they can mark a point of no return. Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Wang Nan. The betrayal of a loved one invariably catches us off guard because we consider people close to us when trust is fully established. With such trust, a stab in the back is unexpected. But what happens if the plan were not fully executed? The victim might be unable to testify due to a serious condition, while the perpetrator frantically tries to cover their tracks without arousing suspicion. It resembles the plot of a thriller, yet, regrettably, this story unfolded a few years ago in real life. This case involved Wang Nan, a pregnant Chinese woman. It became widely known in Thailand. The perpetrator tried to dispose of his wife in a national park and make it appear like a tragic accident. However, nature itself seemed to intervene, saving both the young woman and her child from being killed. When the truth emerged, it shocked not only the detectives on the case, but also the doctors who saved her life. They all believed that her husband was genuinely concerned for his wife and baby. Let's delve deeper into Wang Nan's story. Wang Nan was born in Nanjing, China's former capital and major metropolitan city, in 1987. She grew up in a fairly affluent family where her parents endeavored to provide her with an excellent education and foster the development of her talents and potential. Wang excelled academically, particularly in sciences. After completing school, Wang Nan enrolled at a prestigious university where she pursued studies in business and finance. While mastering several foreign languages during her courses, she also achieved stellar academic records. After receiving her diploma, she secured a position in a prominent travel agency. She swiftly proved herself a valuable, responsible, and highly motivated employee. Her dedication enabled her to climb the career ladder quickly. Before long, she was sent to Thailand to head a new branch and oversee its development. Nan served as a top manager for several years, but decided to leave the travel agency eventually. She pursued her entrepreneurial dreams by opening a Chinese national cuisine restaurant. She managed it so effectively that it grew into a small yet popular chain in Bangkok. Despite nearing 30 years old and living in Thailand for an extended period, Wang didn't let loneliness bother her much. She stayed focused on business and worked tirelessly around the clock. Even though she had learned the local language well enough, she opted to refine her skills further by enrolling in additional courses at a training center. During one of these sessions, Wang met a young man named Yu Xiaodong who couldn't help but stare at her for several minutes before approaching. Speaking native language, they exchanged pleasantries. Yu Xiaodong eventually asked Nan why she was studying this language further. She explained that it was essential for developing her business. Yu then suggested they exchange business cards for future networking opportunities. Although Nan wasn't particularly interested in extending their conversation, out of politeness, she handed him her business card and accepted his in return. His card indicated that Yu Xiaodong operated an export-import business in Bangkok. Wang wasn't particularly impressed and casually tossed the business card into her purse, likely forgetting about it soon after. However, Yu seemed genuinely interested in the young woman and decided to call her the very next day. Nan was busy with work and couldn't spare even a few minutes for a conversation, so she declined his offer to meet for coffee. A few days later, a similar situation occurred, with Nan once again refusing due to her hectic schedule and preparations for an upcoming business conference. She intended to expand her professional network and create new business partnerships there. Yu Xiaodong attended the event with a stunning bouquet of flowers, patiently waiting for an opportunity to approach Nan once she was free. When he did, he asked her out again. This time, Wang Nan was swayed by his persistence. No one had ever tried so hard to gain her attention before. She agreed to meet him for dinner. What followed appeared to be an unforeseen romance. Yu didn't just fall in love with Nan, he seemed utterly captivated by her. He constantly expressed his affection through thoughtful gestures, surprising her with gifts and flowers every morning accompanied by little romantic notes. He also called at least twice daily to wish her good morning and good night. Nan's feelings were mixed. On one hand, she felt annoyed by Yu's persistent attention. On the other hand, she was flattered that someone would go to such lengths to win her over. Unexpectedly, for the first time in a long while, she found herself immersed in a romantic relationship. Yu endeavored not just to court her well, but also aimed for perfection in every aspect of their relationship. He shared many of Wang's interests and viewpoints, learned how to cook her favorite dishes, and sought to make their time together enjoyable by securing tickets to various events. Moreover, he showed readiness to assist with both professional and personal tasks at the first sign of need. Wang Nan could hardly believe her luck. It all felt like something from a movie, but was happening in real life. However, Yu seemed in too much of a hurry. They had only been dating for several months when he began planning their wedding and even thinking up names for potential future children. Wang felt a bit uneasy with this type of. At moments like these, she found herself discussing how they were both in their 30s. At that age, it was natural to start planning for a family and a wedding, even without rings and veils. Nan, unsure of how to act or respond to her suitor's behavior, acknowledged that he was right about their age. Still, she harbored doubts about whether he was the person to marry. After yet another deep, heartfelt discussion where Nan candidly expressed her uncertainties, Yu assured her that he would demonstrate his love that very night. Once home, the man in love sent his girlfriend a lengthy and touching letter filled with tenderness. He confessed his love for her and promised to be the best husband and father to their future children. The next morning, Wang found her suitor standing on her doorstep with a bouquet of flowers. Xiaodong declared that he had never been so serious in his intentions and was ready to marry her immediately. Nan pointed out that the courthouse wouldn't open for another hour and a half. To this, Yu suggested going there right away, stating that if the door was open, they would get married immediately. Wang agreed to this venture, confident that the government office would be closed. To her astonishment, the door was indeed open, and the officer authorized to register marriages was already at his desk. It later became clear that Yu had arranged everything in advance by requesting an early exception for him and his bride. Their wedding proved strange. No guests attended. There were no rings or formal dress. Even memorable photos were absent. Wang Nan couldn't shake off the feeling that nothing about this felt genuine, since she hadn't even introduced her chosen partner to her mother, with whom she had always been very close. As she regained awareness of the situation, she found herself holding a marriage certificate. Next to her stood a satisfied and smiling newlywed husband. In June 2019, a tragic accident occurred when Wang was 3 months pregnant. Her husband persuaded her to arrange a vacation and go on a small trip, reasoning that after the birth of the baby, they would not be able to get out anywhere for a long time. Nan reluctantly agreed, and they chose the Thai National Park Reserve, famous for its picturesque forests and unique rock paintings, the age of which is estimated at tens of thousands of years. However, on the morning of June 9th, tragedy struck. The couple were on one of the observation decks admiring the sunrise, when Wang Nan suddenly fell from a height of 1 feet. When rescuers arrived at the scene, a crying man ran up to them and begged for medics to save his wife and the baby. The man said they were enjoying the first rays of the rising sun when suddenly his wife felt sick. She took a step to the side but became dizzy and fell before he could catch her. The young woman had fallen from a height equivalent to 10 floors. She had several open fractures and the situation seemed hopeless. But then, unexpectedly, Nan groaned and opened her eyes. Her husband immediately stopped crying and wailing. A look of horror appeared on his face. However, he quickly composed himself, expressed immense relief that his beloved was alive by thanking Providence loudly, and then leaned in to whisper something in Chinese into her ear. Before delving into that tragic day's events further, let's rewind 6 months to understand how their family life was unfolding. Wang regretted her marriage almost immediately after it was registered. Initially, she hoped Yu would be a good husband, reliable support, and someone she could rely on. Unfortunately, these hopes were dashed as her new husband revealed his true nature soon after. He spent almost all his time at home playing computer games and willingly used his wife's money without contributing anything to the family budget. When questioned about not working, Xiaodong replied that his business was in a seasonal lull and claimed he could rest for now. However, this lull extended too long for comfort. Curious about her husband's work claims, the young woman decided to investigate further. That's when she discovered that his so-called successful export-import existed only on paper and printed business cards. At that moment, Wang comprehended the enormity of the mistake she had made. She hadn't even considered drafting a prenup agreement, so now her husband could freely spend what she earned. In case of a divorce, he would claim her property. The couple had a serious conversation during which he cried like a child and assured her that he had temporary difficulties but would definitely improve and find a good job. However, it soon became evident that he wasn't planning to seek employment and felt quite comfortable living off his wife's earnings. He behaved like a child, spending most of his time playing computer games. If he did something around the house or helped his wife at the restaurant, he always asked for money for his own needs. Wang eventually grew tired of this behavior and informed him that she would no longer give him any money until he found a job. Following this confrontation, he disappeared. Along with him went Nan's marriage certificate and identity card, though she only noticed the missing documents in the evening when her accountant called about the transfer of a significant sum from her account. The young woman was shocked because she hadn't authorized any transfer. She quickly suspected who was responsible. The amount involved was more than $500,000, which her husband had moved to his personal account using their marriage certificate, her documents, and assurances that it was their joint money managed together. Wang didn't hesitate to report the theft to the police. The fugitive husband was tracked down within hours as he attempted to withdraw some of the funds at a station. He sobbed again and knelt, begging for his wife's forgiveness. He admitted to losing a large sum gambling and claimed debts threatened his life if not repaid. Additionally, it turned out this wasn't his first run-in with the law. Back in China, he had served 8 years for robbery. Nan nearly burned with shame at this revelation. When she listened to all this, it turned out she did not know the man she married. However, the young woman felt that gambling is a disease and believed she must help her husband overcome this addiction and return to normal life. Wang agreed to pay off half of her husband's debt and made him the manager of one of her restaurants. At first, Yu Xiaodong accepted it gratefully and took on his new position responsibly. He even developed a good strategy for the establishment's growth. But his enthusiasm didn't last long. Soon, he started spending more time playing computer games and seeking out entertainment. Around that time, Wang discovered she was pregnant. She informed her husband, but he reacted strangely and even aggressively. Yu said he wasn't ready for this and persuaded his wife to have an abortion, which she categorically refused. Then, her husband threatened divorce and said he intended to seek a division of property through the court. He didn't speak to his wife for several days, but then suddenly softened and apologized. Yu admitted that he spoke out of emotion and was actually happy about the upcoming edition. He began showing care again by cooking and helping around the house. 2 months later, Wang was absolutely happy because her marriage seemed almost perfect, just as promised by her lover at the beginning of their relationship. He was attentive, caring, fulfilled his job as manager responsibly, and actively prepared their home for the child's arrival. One day, Xiaodong suggested ensuring Wang's life and health because she was pregnant. Such a step would protect both her and the baby in case of various unforeseen situations. The young woman agreed readily and even wondered why she hadn't thought of it before. The insurance was taken out the very next day, and a couple of weeks later, Yu talked about taking a vacation to relax and unwind. Wang was hesitant at first, but her husband insisted they hadn't had a honeymoon yet. With a baby on the way, traveling wouldn't be possible in coming years. He mentioned that they had gone through a difficult period and needed to reset to dispel all the negativity and heavy thoughts. In the end, his arguments proved convincing, so Nan agreed. Her husband chose the place himself, booked the hotel, mapped out the activities, and planned the itineraries meticulously. He ensured the trip would be exciting, but not too exhausting for his pregnant wife. Nan entrusted everything to her husband and was pleased to see how enthusiastic he was about planning their vacation. On June 7th, the couple arrived at the park for the first time and spent most of the day there. They walked a lot and visited numerous beautiful sights and lookouts. That summer Friday evening, the park was teeming with visitors. Towards evening, Wang noticed that her husband was getting visibly angry and nervous. When she asked if everything was all right, he replied that due to the crowd of tourists, they couldn't have privacy or enjoy the sunset in silence. Relenting eventually, Wang Nan decided it would be very romantic as the sun set since fewer people were around. Yu Xiaodong climbed the fence of the observation deck and called his wife to join him at the edge, promising an incredible view. However, Wang refused because it was already dark and could be dangerous. Though initially upset, her husband returned after a few minutes and suggested they come back to meet sunrise at the park. Since they returned to their hotel well past midnight on Friday, they decided to rest on Saturday and head back early Sunday morning as planned. Early Sunday morning on June 9th, they went to admire the rising sun at the national park. Waking up around 3 a.m. while it was still dark outside meant there were hardly any visitors. For a moment, Nan thought they were all alone there. The couple witnessed dawn from one of the observation decks before Yu Xiaodong descended towards a cliff, persuading his wife to join him in admiring rock paintings. Initially hesitant, Nan approached cautiously upon her husband's assurances regarding safety. The view from up there was indeed mesmerizing. Yu Xiaodong hugged his wife, then suddenly asked if she regretted anything in life. Surprised by such an inquiry, but confident nonetheless, Nan responded that she didn't regret anything. Yu Xiaodong gently ran his hand through his wife's hair, kissed her on the cheek, and leaned in close to whisper in her ear, "Die." At that moment, he let go of her and pushed her off the cliff. He his surroundings once more to ensure there were no witnesses. Airing down, he could pinpoint where exactly she had fallen. He listened carefully. There were no screams or cries for help. This confirmed there were no witnesses below either. Yu Xiaodong then calmly made his way toward the park exit, intending to report the incident later when Wang was surely dead. However, a few hikers who had strayed off the trail discovered Wang's body on the rocks and immediately notified rescuers. By this time, Yu Xiaodong had already left the scents. As several emergency vehicles sped past him with sirens blaring, he quickly realized what was happening and returned to the scene. Upon reaching the site where his wife had fallen, he put on a convincing display of grief. Tears, screams, and desperate pleas for help ensued. Believing his wife was dead, he felt assured that no one would uncover the truth. But during the fall, Wang was caught by tree branches, slowing her descent. She first landed on bushes before rolling onto rocks. This sequence cushioned her fall and saved both her life and that of their unborn child, though she sustained serious injuries. As Yu Xiaodong continued his lamentations about not wanting to live without his beloved wife and child, she unexpectedly opened her eyes and attempted to speak, but couldn't form words. Observers noted the genuine terror on Yu Xiaodong's face, but saw him quickly regain composure as he leaned over her again, hissing in Chinese for her to remain silent if she wished to live. Attempts to finalize his grim intentions failed. Wang suffered severe head trauma, multiple closed and open fractures, numerous lacerations and contusions of soft tissue, and ruptured internal organs, leading to massive blood loss. Additionally, her spine was critically damaged. Doctors feared that even if she survived, she might never walk again. Wang spent several days in a coma, hooked up to life support machines, as medical staff worked tirelessly to save her life. During this time, her husband never left her side, spending both days and nights in her room. The doctors praised his dedication and love. However, when Yu Xiaodong was alone with his wife, he contemplated how to end her life without raising suspicion. He examined the medical equipment thoroughly but couldn't figure out how to disable it discreetly. The horrifying truth and the tragic loss of a child became evident when Wang regained consciousness. Her husband was terrified, not leaving her alone for a moment, fearing she might reveal the truth to the police at any time. When alone with her, he threatened her again, stating he had nothing left to lose. In the initial interrogation, Wang corroborated her husband's story, saying that dizziness caused her fall. Yet a few hours later, when her husband out briefly, she asked a nurse to call the police and ensure he didn't enter her room. That's when she recounted the harrowing story of how he had tried to kill her. Yu Xiaodong stormed into the room, claiming she was delusional due to head trauma and asserting he'd never harm her or their baby. His statements seemed highly unconvincing, and he was taken into custody that same day. He faced multiple charges, including attempted murder and intimidation. When her husband was arrested and jailed awaiting trial, Wang felt a profound relief. Though she faced an extended period of rehabilitation ahead of her, she now felt secure. Initially hopeful that her pregnancy could be saved, since the baby survived the fall from such heights, complications arose. Due to potent painkillers, several surgeries under general anesthesia, and required antibiotics use, doctors recommended an abortion, prioritizing Wang's health, as survival chances for the fetus were minimal due to drug exposure. It was a significant shock for Nan, but she adhered to the doctor's recommendations. Throughout the trial and sentencing, Xiaodong consistently denied his guilt. In prison, he remained calm, hired skilled lawyers, and was confident he would escape punishment, or that it wouldn't be too severe. Investigators and the prosecutor in charge of the case had no doubt that he committed the crime out of interest, hoping to receive a large insurance payout and inherit his wife's fortune, which at that time amounted to almost $2.5 million. However, during one of the interrogations, Xiao shocked everyone by revealing another motive for his inhumane act. It turns out he held resentment towards his wife when she agreed to repay only half of his debt accrued due to a passion for gambling. In his opinion, if his wife truly loved him, she would have settled all his debts because she had the money. He then decided Wang did not love him and felt justified in punishing her for it. After these revelations, Xiao fell silent and claimed he had been misunderstood. But this unexpected confession, coupled with Nan's testimony, was sufficient to send him to prison for a long duration. By March 2021, Xiaodong was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, Xiao and his legal team filed several appeals. Just 6 months later, the Thai court demonstrated surprising leniency by reducing the life sentence to just 10 years in prison. Nan and her loved ones were deeply shocked by this decision. They expressed concerns that such leniency could set a dangerous precedent and might encourage others to commit similar horrific acts. Around that same period in Thailand, on Phuket Island, a comparable case took place where a Chinese national drowned his wife while claiming it was a swimming accident on the beach. He also did it for insurance purposes since the murder was proven. Consequently, the man received a death sentence. Xiaodong, on the other hand, was sentenced to just 10 years for the failed murder attempt and for the murder of the fetus. What's Wang Nan's current status? Well, as of now, there's been no final verdict in her case. She's serving her 10-year sentence, and the injured woman is trying to challenge the court's decision in parallel. Yu Xiaodong is also appealing to prove his innocence and secure his release. He stood up for his numerous relatives who claimed he was a wealthy businessman and that Wang married him with selfish motives. However, there's no proof of this. The man has nothing but significant debts. As for Nan, contrary to doctors' predictions, after several complicated surgeries and lengthy rehabilitation, she managed to get back on her feet. She relearned how to walk. Most of her earnings went towards her recovery. In 2023, she resumed work and revitalized her previously successful business. She has also established and leads an organization to help women who are victims of domestic violence. Additionally, she runs a blog aimed at warning women against making the same mistakes she made. Have you heard the story about the nuclear power plant employee from Springfield who was having problems with his wife? No, we're not talking about Homer Simpson. We're talking about this guy.
911 emergency, what's emergency?
Help me! My God, my wife's breathing.
Okay, you need an ambulance?
I need everything. I need everything.
Springfield Police.
Yes, help me.
What's the problem?
I just shot this man in my house.
He's inside your house
Killed
right
my
now?
wife. He beat my wife.
Sounds legit, right? Wrong. What you heard just now was the voice of an extremely talented liar. In 1995, Mark Winger, a nuclear power plant technician in Springfield, Illinois, murdered his wife by beating her to death with a hammer. In an even darker twist to the story, he framed someone else for the murder, married their child's nanny shortly afterwards, and got away with murder for nearly 4 years. So how did he do it? Hi, and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today I'm going to take you guys through another case with the most insane twists you've ever heard. In June of 1995, it seemed like life couldn't possibly get any better for Mark and Donna Winger. The nuclear technician and his wife had been happily married for several years, and they had just adopted a newborn baby girl named Bailey. Donna was the oldest of 3 sisters in what they described as an incredibly close-knit family. The Dreschers grew to love Mark too. He was smart, Jewish. He was attractive and he was fun, Donna's sister Jenny Levin told the media. Donna just felt like she had found her person. After Mark and Donna Winger were married in 1989, he was offered a job, and the newlyweds settled in Springfield, Illinois. We always joked about the fact when one sister marries, that husband marries 3 sisters, Levin said. We shared our lives with Mark. Donna was working as an operating room technician and Mark was a nuclear engineer. Donna couldn't have been happier. The only thing she would have liked to was to have a child, her stepfather, Ira Drescher, said. Donna's mother, Sarah Jane Drescher, said her daughter was overwhelmed when she learned that she could not get pregnant. But then one day while working at the hospital, a doctor told Donna that a teenager was looking to put her baby up for adoption. Adopting the child was an easy decision for her. She looked at me with tears when she said, "Michelle, I knew it the minute they put the baby into my arms. She has always been mine," Donna's sister Michelle Hansen said. The Wingers welcomed baby Bailey into their home on June 1st, 1995. Donna's family said the couple loved their new roles as parents. They seemed to have all the makings of a long and happy life together. Mark was just as excited to become a dad as Donna was to become a mom, Hansen said. Donna had met the woman who would eventually become her best friend, Deanne Schultz, at the hospital, and with the arrival of Bailey, the two bonded over motherhood. But then everything turned dark. In August 1995, Donna took baby Bailey on a trip to Hollywood, Florida, to visit Donna's family. Her mother had just dropped the 2 of them off at the airport and hired a driver to pick them up in St. Louis, Missouri, and drive them back to Springfield. So after the visit, the 2 flew into St. Louis Airport and hopped in a cab driven by Roger Harrington with a 2-hour ride back to Springfield. During the course of the drive, Harrington reportedly began flirting with Donna and talking about drugs and orgies. Detective Charlie Cox, a police officer who investigated Donna's death, later said, "This gentleman started opening up to Donna about issues he was having. He had a voice in his head named Dom. Dom would tell him to do bad things. Recently, Dom was telling him to hurt people." After Donna safely arrived home with Bailey, she called the transit company to make a formal complaint about Harrington's behavior, and the driver was suspended. Cox later said that the driver started flirting with Donna, telling her he liked older women and even invited her to attend what he described as one of his sex parties. Donna had told her family that the ride was terrifying because he was driving erratically at 75 miles per hour. After the harrowing ride, Donna had been the victim of some strange phone calls, Weinhoft said. The family had believed that the driver had been stalking her and was a danger. Donna called a limousine company to file a complaint and Harrington was suspended. Mark argued his wife to write down the story in case they might need it. Police later found the note describing Donna's harrowing ride in her handwriting at the crime scene. Donna also told Mark about the experience, and though he played a part of the supportive husband, and helped her file the complaint, it turned out that he had ulterior motives for doing so. Just days later, Mark invited Harrington to their home, perhaps under the pretense of helping him get his job back. On the 29th of August 1995, the cab driver wrote Mark's name, address, and the time on a scrap of paper in his car, drove to the Winger's home, walked inside with a coffee cup and a pack of cigarettes, and was shot twice in the head. Mark Winger then called 911 and told the dispatcher he'd just shot a man who was killing his wife. He informed police that he'd been walking on the treadmill in the basement when he heard a commotion upstairs. He grabbed his gun, went to investigate, and found Harrington swinging a hammer at Donna. In an effort to defend his wife, he'd shot the man twice. Police arrived on the scene to find that both Donna and Harrington still had a weak pulse. Mark was in a back bedroom, rolling back and forth in total shock. When former Springfield Police Detective Charlie Cox arrived at the Wingers' home, he remembered they could see the victims from the front door. Donna was clinging to life, said Sangamon County Assistant State Attorney Steve Weinhold. She had been hit no less than 7 times in the head with a hammer. The second victim, a white man, had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head, but still had a pulse when police arrived, said Weinhold. It was quite chaotic, Cox said. I knew that they were probably going to be transporting the victim soon, so I wanted to try and get identification on the male suspect. Cox found the man's wallet and was able to identify him as Roger Harrington. Police recovered a bloody hammer near the 2 bodies and found Mark's .45 caliber semi-automatic handgun, a yellow mug, and a pack of cigarettes on the same dining table. They also noticed that Harrington's car had been parked against traffic, facing the wrong direction. At the crime scene, Cox said Mark was very upset and very emotional, and that he repeatedly asked who the man he'd killed was. Cox avoided identifying Harrington and tried to calm Mark down. As police combed through the scene, Mark asked police if the intruder's name was Roger. Cox confirmed that it was. Mark was shocked and he said, "Oh my gosh, that's the man who's been harassing my wife this week," Cox said. Cox, who was familiar with Harrington after he'd lived in a trailer park owned by Cox, believed Harrington might have snapped. "I knew him as a very volatile type subject. He and his wife rented a trailer for me," Cox said. "Knowing what I knew about Mr. Harrington in the past, how quick he was to anger, I thought that very well he could have gone over there to try to get his job back. There's a hammer laying right there on the table. He picks it up and goes into a rage, then the husband shoots the bad guy." Tragically, both victims succumbed to their injuries. After learning about Donna's previous run-in with Harrington and listening to Mark's version of events, the police closed the case within days, listing Roger Harrington as the culprit. Because once police examined the scene and listened to Mark's story, detectives concluded that he had acted in self-defense. The case was closed in about 48 hours, Weinhold said. But Harrington's family insisted from the beginning that their son was harmless. "He was no troublemaker. He was a good kid. He wouldn't even strike at anybody," his mother, Helen Harrington, said. "I don't think he would hurt anybody, and I don't think he was crazy." So it seemed like Mark Winger was going to get away with murder. Donna's mother spoke to the media about the evening, and the family received the news of her daughter's murder. "It was 4 a.m, and I said, 'Jenny, it's Mom. Something terrible has happened,' Sarah Jane Drescher said of her call to Levin. "We sat there in my room, just crying at this unimaginable loss," Levin said. In the following months, Donna's mother and sister took turns traveling to Illinois to help take care of Bailey. "I loved Mark because he loved Donna, and that's what was important to me," Sarah Jane Drescher said. "But I had to be very careful because I did not want to ruin my relationship with him, because I did not want to ruin my relationship with the baby. I wanted to be a grandma, and Bailey made me a grandma." Mark was now a single father raising his infant daughter on his own. Donna's family initially flew to Illinois to help out, but they couldn't stay, and they suggested Mark hire a nanny. In January 1996, he met 23-year-old Rebecca Simic, who was searching for a nanny job in the area. Rebecca told reporters, "It just felt like Bailey was the one that really needed me the most. She had been through so much already at the age of 3 months." Rebecca was wonderful with Bailey, and even Donna's family agreed that she was like an angel sent to help Mark. While she felt a little uncomfortable in the house, where 2 people had died violently, she was dedicated to giving Bailey a good childhood despite the trauma of losing her mother. "I didn't want to like Rebecca, but it was hard not to like her," Levin said. "Seeing her with Bailey, there was really nothing bad we could say about her." Meanwhile, Rebecca's role at Mark's home had begun to evolve. When you live with someone and you're taking care of a child together, it's very easy to kind of play house, Rebecca said later on. Rebecca told the media that she was blown away by what the infant had been through in such a short time. Mark made me feel like I was like an angel sent to him from God or Donna, and it was my purpose to make this family whole again, Rebecca said. She lost 2 mothers by the time she was 3 months old, and she was so smiley, Rebecca said. I wanted to get in there and say, I'm going to help and I'm going to make this little girl's life better. Mark helped Rebecca feel at ease in her new role. After a few months, the two found themselves sharing conversation and a glass of wine at the end of a long day. And then one thing led to another as their relationship turned intimate. Within the year, Rebecca was pregnant with Mark's child. The couple eloped in Hawaii in October 1996, just 14 months after Donna's death. I remember asking him how he could move on so quickly, Rebecca later recalled, and he explained to me that when you have a good marriage, it's natural for you to just want that again. Rebecca said Mark had told her he wasn't able to have children, so she said she was very surprised when she found out she was pregnant with his child only months after moving in. Obviously, I wasn't careful. It was just kind of a shock, she said. Mark, on the other hand, was thrilled, Rebecca recalled. It felt like it was a victory to him, she said. Mark put pressure on me to marry him and have children with him. Rebecca said that Mark, who was Jewish when they met, even started going to church with her. She said he told her they could raise a family in a Christian home. I would be honored to be your husband and blessed if you were my wife, Mark wrote in a letter to Rebecca. Mark's rabbi, Michael Datz, asked him about his change in faith, and he said that Mark explained, Judaism is just too difficult and unforgiving. Rabbi Datz didn't understand, asking, Mark, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you need forgiveness for? He said Mark didn't respond. But then it seemed like Mark was trying almost a little too hard to leave the past behind. 16 months after his wife's death, Mark told Sarah Jane Drescher that he was going to sell the house where her daughter Donna had died and buy another one just outside of town. He and Rebecca had started a family of their own, and he started cutting ties with Donna's parents. I received a letter from Mark one day saying to me I could not be called Grandma, Sarah Jane Drescher said. I wrote him back and I begged him, please let her call me Grandma. And he said, I'm sorry, there's no way I am going to allow her to call you Grandma, and that's the way it is. Sarah said she mourned that loss for a long time. Bailey Simic, now 25, told reporters that her grandmother and grandfather, Ira Drescher, would send a birthday card to her every year. I always remember asking my mom, who's Sarah Jane and Ira, she said. My mom would always explain, like, those are Donna's parents, and they just want to let you know that, like, they love you and that they remember you. Eventually, Mark sold the house where Donna had died and moved with his new wife to the suburbs outside of Springfield. Things seemed great on the surface. They had 3 children together, and Rebecca raised Bailey as her daughter. Though chaotic, their life seemed almost perfect. Mark was a loving partner and a very involved father. That would all change quite soon. One day in early 1909, when Mark was feeling ill, Rebecca took him to the emergency room in the hospital where Donna had worked before her death. There they saw Donna's best friend and co-worker, Deanne Schultz. She seemed upset to see Mark, and Rebecca remembered that Deanne had acted strangely when she first came on Bailey's nanny, as if she were anxious to stay involved in Bailey's life. After they returned home, Mark commented that that may not be the last they heard from Deanne. He was right. In February 1999, Deanne dropped a bombshell on the police, revealing that she and Mark had been having an affair before Donna's death. She said that, at one point, he'd remarked to her that things would be easier for them if Donna was dead. She told them that after Donna's fateful ride with Roger Harrington, Mark said that he needed to get that driver to the house. All you'd need to do is find the body, he told her. Deanne never thought Mark was serious, but when Donna turned up dead soon after, she knew he had done it. Mark had threatened her not to tell anyone about the things he'd said, and she'd attempted suicide several times while struggling with her guilt. After seeing him in the hospital, she decided she couldn't keep quiet any longer. After hearing Deanne's story, police decided to take a closer look at the evidence from the day of the murders. The more they thought about what they'd once assumed was an open and shut case, the more questions they had. Why were there no signs of forced entry into the Winger home that August day? Why would Roger Harrington bring his cup of coffee and cigarettes into the house with him if he'd planned to attack Donna? And why would he use the winger's hammer as a weapon when he had a tire iron and a knife in his car? At that point, investigators came upon 3 never-before-seen Polaroid photos taken the day of the murders. They'd been with the evidence collected in a civil suit Mark had filed against the transportation company that had employed Harrington. The position of the bodies in the photos showed that Mark's version of events were not possible. Mark Winger had stated that Roger Harrington was kneeling right next to Donna Winger's head and he was beating her with a hammer, Weinhoft explained. He stated that he shot him and that the man fell backward so that his feet remained near Donna's head. In reality, the Polaroid photographs show the exact opposite. Blood spatter experts agreed. Cox later told the media, "I was ashamed of the way the investigation went. I heard Roger Harrington's family. I ran his name through hell for no reason. I mean, he was an innocent victim." It had become clear that Mark was the real murderer behind the scenes the whole time. Rebecca Simic was left to make sense of the tragedy. She had no idea what Mark was capable of, and afterward, she moved her 4 children out of Springfield to feel safer. While Mark had tried to keep Bailey away from Donna's family, Rebecca encouraged them to be reunited. "We'd been hurt a lot by the same person," Rebecca said, "but it didn't break us." Donna's family and Rebecca spoke to reporters about the horrific realization that Mark was a manipulative killer hiding behind the mask of a brilliant engineer and a kind, loving husband and father. In December 1999, more than 4 years after the murders, the Springfield State Journal-Register ran an article based on allegations in the civil lawsuit that Mark had arranged the murder himself and killed both his wife and Harrington. The allegations were based on a blood spatter expert hired by Bark Transportation in the case after the arrest of their employee Harrington. "Everything came to a head. It changed everything," Rebecca said of the article. "I mean, it went from Mark as the hero who was defending his wife, this noble stand-up guy that every man wanted to pat on the back, to a manipulative, deviant murderer." As the detectives continued their reinvestigation, they learned that Harrington's roommate, Susan Collins, had initially told police that someone asked to meet with Harrington on the day of the murders and that she had seen Harrington on the phone arranging that meeting. Inside Harrington's car, they found a note written on a bank deposit slip with Mark's name, his address, and the time to be there. Roger Harrington was not an intruder, but rather he was lured into that home by Mark Winger, Weinhoft said. Deanne Schultz's cooperation with police and evidence that raised questions about Mark's story prompted the voluntary dismissal of the civil suit against Bark Transportation. "I didn't see it coming," Rebecca said. "I didn't know that this whole investigation was brewing. I never thought the whole time that they thought my husband was a diabolical murderer." A warrant was issued for Mark's arrest, and he was taken into custody while at work. "I had made plans to go to McDonald's Playland," Rebecca recalled. "We were there and I got a phone call, and it was Mark's secretary, and she told me that Mark had just been arrested. I was just sick. Like my whole body kind of went numb, and I just couldn't believe it. I was shaking so badly, and I just remembered feeling so scared. I felt that I owed it to him and to my kids to just stand by him," she said. Hanson, Donna's sister, said she didn't feel relieved following Mark's arrest. "I still wanted to believe he was innocent," she said. "Here's this person that I know in handcuffs, and what's going to happen?" Bailey was just 6 years old at the time of Mark's arrest. She said no longer having her father home was scary. "I just remember everyone just trying to remain calm and kind of, at the time, being like, 'Dad's just going away for a while and that he'll be back soon,'" she said. But that was no longer possible. On August 23, 2001, Mark Winger was indicted for the murders of Donna Winger and Roger Harrington. At the trial in May 2002, a visibly shaky Deanne testified against Mark. The court granted her immunity in exchange for her testimony, though there was no evidence linking her to anything other than keeping Mark's terrible secret. Mark was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. One of the key points the prosecution had to prove was that Harrington had gone to the house to meet with the Wingers, not to commit a murder. They presented the cigarettes and coffee mug that he'd brought inside, as well as the weapons he'd left in his car and the note with Mark's name and address. Mark's attorney argued that Harrington was mentally ill, that he behaved erratically, and that these traits indicated he was capable of murder. When prosecutors presented the Polaroid showing the position of the bodies before they were removed from the scene, Mark's attorney argued throughout the trial that first responders could have moved the bodies. It's our belief that Roger comes to the house, he's allowed into the home, now retired Detective Jim Graham said. There were no signs of forced entry, and he was executed at that time. Hearing the gunshot, Donna Winger then comes from the bathroom to investigate. He then beats his wife to death with a hammer. Mark then calls 911. In the 911 call, someone can be heard moaning in the background. When Mark tells the operator he can hear his baby crying and hangs up. He had told the operator there was a bullet in Harrington's head, but when police arrived, Harrington had been shot twice. Deanne also gave damning testimony at the trial, saying that Mark told her it would be easier if Donna just died. I thought it was crazy talk, she said during her cross-examination. After a chance meeting years later, Deanne testified that she confronted Mark in the hopes of gathering information and asked him how he lived with himself, and that he'd replied that he had found Jesus Christ and was forgiven. She said he warned her that if she ever said anything, they would both be in trouble. I didn't think that anybody would believe her, Rebecca said. I just thought if Mark truly did that, she would have come forward right away. Mark's defense argued that Deanne was emotionally unstable and just a woman who had been scorned. Deanne Schiltz's testimony was able to demonstrate that in reality, Mark was obviously unhappy, unfaithful, and had specifically talked about wanting to kill his wife, Weinhoft said. Schiltz was granted immunity for her testimony, he added. There was no direct evidence that directly linked Deanne to actively participating in this crime. In the end, she was such a valuable witness as it relates to presenting the motive. After a trial that lasted 3 weeks, the jury found Mark Winger guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Rebecca said she believed he would be going home with them. After the verdict, she said the words guilty rang through her head and that she wanted the earth to open up and swallow me. Sarah Jane Drescher and her daughters, Donna's sisters, were with her when they heard the verdict. The 3 of us just embraced and cried, she said. And the story gets even more twisted, because 4 years later, Mark was also sentenced to an additional 35 years in prison when he tried to hire a hitman to kill Deanne for testifying against him. He even attempted to put out a hit against a childhood friend who had refused to pay his bail. Helen Harrington was relieved and grateful that her son had been vindicated of Donna's murder. We knew that Roger was innocent, and it finally got proven, she said. He was branded a murderer at the time, but then all this came to an end. The police also had to come to terms with the faulty initial investigation. I was ashamed of the way the investigation went, Cox said. I heard Roger Harrington's family. I ran his name through hell for no reason. I mean, he was an innocent victim. The police department had too hastily closed the case and turned a blind eye to some red flags, and to right such a wrong, it felt great, Bram added. But Rebecca said there wasn't any closure for her or her family. When we lose someone, we gather. We have a funeral, Rebecca shared. But when someone goes to prison, well, what do? You're just kind of left with this emptiness and this hole that you can't really have closure with that. It wasn't just him being sentenced to life, she said. We were sentenced to a life of a father in prison. Bailey Simic says she missed having her father around while growing up. It was really hard being in school, seeing all the other kids had their dads and that relationship, she said. And now suddenly, I couldn't just go to my dad's room or have him pick us up from school or anything like that. Ben Simic was only a year old when his dad went to prison. I can look at the pictures and look at myself and say, that kid has no idea. He was way too young to know anything that was going on, he said. Rebecca had to move out of Springfield with her kids, and the home that she'd bought with Mark was foreclosed. She had been a stay-at-home mom for 7 years, so she had no option but to file for bankruptcy. I didn't have anything to give my kids. Everything had been taken away. All I had was love, she said. Rebecca never remarried as far as we know. She raised all 4 of the children on her own. And Bailey has since reunited with Donna's family. It was so incredible to see that there's this whole big family that loves me, and Sarah Jane still has my baby picture on her kitchen counter, with all of her other grandkids, even though we've been gone for so long, she said. We've been hurt a lot by the same person, but it didn't break us, Rebecca said. Although Sarah Jane Drescher says there will never be closure for the murder of her daughter, the family has worked together to set up Donna's Fund, which is a part of Women in Distress, an organization that works to provide shelter for women trying to escape abuse. I think her legacy will live on through people that we help, Levin said. and through the beautiful memories that we have of her. So what do you think of this crazy, twisted case of murder uncovered? Would Mark Winger still be walking scot-free today if his former lover, Deanne Schultz, hadn't developed a guilty conscience? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to like, share, and hit the subscribe for more in-depth coverage of some of the most manipulative murders of all time. Stay safe, friends. Until next time.